This special meeting of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 12:01 p.m. I'm very pleased that you've taken time to join us this afternoon. In compliance with the State Government Code on open meetings, today's agenda has been appropriately posted. We've established a quorum, and I will call roll if you would please indicate. Mr. Macias should be joining us shortly. The next item on our agenda is public comment period. Did we have anyone with public comment? Ms. Holmes? Okay. So we will move on, and I'm going to rearrange the agenda slightly to take care of a couple of things of business so that our facilities people can move on their way.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to, Dr. Fields, ask you to look at consideration of consent items, consider and take action regarding approving the selection of a temporary chiller rental for Spring Meadows Elementary School, and B, consider and take action regarding approving the selection of a temporary chiller rental for Millers Point Elementary School.
Yes, ma'am. So we have 3 on the agenda for today, and thank you for allowing us to add these on. The first one, Spring Meadows. We need a temporary chiller over at Spring Meadows. I believe the Spring Meadows one is for 2 months. And basically, due to the hot weather that happened, AC is going down everywhere. And by getting this temporary chiller in, we can ensure that when the students come back, that we'll have enough AC up to receive the students and staff at the beginning. And then right after this is approved, we'll move towards getting the compressor or whatever we need to move forward on the chiller. And that'll be for Spring Meadows, and you can see the price there associated and who we'll be working with. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so the compressors, what went out on that one?
I
That has to be
believe I would
replaced?
have them. I don't want to misspeak,
Okay.
but can we, no. I need you to move to the microphone.
The microphone.
Here, you see one of this?
No.
I'll
They go
put
for
it.
that.
Dr. Fields, is there an attachment? Because I didn't see an attachment.
It was in,
It was on the board. It
It's
was
there,
in
it's
the board
in
book.
board book
Okay, I didn't.
You can use mine, ma'am.
with the item.
Can you give that to her?
So for Spring Meadows, it's the VSD drive?
The controller for the compressor itself, the compressor's all right, but it's the controller that controls it. And the problem has been the lead time for it.
okay, and then, but otherwise, that system is in fairly decent shape, because that wasn't on, like, we have some things that are on the chiller replacement list for 2022 bond, and Spring Meadows wasn't one of them.
Correct.
So this is just, I think I've had this piece go out on my air conditioner
I
too,
would
so.
say this one and the next one, Millers Point.
Millers
Neither
Point.
one of those were on the,
Okay,
Right, this is just a part on the compressor.
Okay.
But the lead time for the part is,
a couple months.
Actually, I think we may be able to just get this rental for 1 month. I found out the part's going to be starting to ship on August 2nd.
let's not try to adjust what's in the board book. We have
Okay,
2
nope,
months.
we're good. Nope,
That's what we're going
no, it says up to 2 months.
Yeah,
Up to 2 months. They'll rent it for less if they can rent it for less. We'll send it back right away. So, okay, so I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be a long-term problem.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the funds for that are coming out of local? Pay for the
Correct.
rental
Those will
local?
be coming out of local for now. I will tell you that neither one of these were on the budget,
That's
so
okay.
this
My
is
next
the
question.
first. Yes, ma'am, we will run a tally, and for those who are keeping tabs, this would be a total of 180.
Okay, did we have, did maintenance budget in a certain amount for, because I mean, stuff like this happens we have maintenance all the time, so is there like a little pot of fixed broken stuff money that was already figured into the budget, or is every repair we do all year all going to be new budget amendments?
Some
essentially?
of the minor things, 5,000, 4,000, yes. But
Okay.
when we're talking about 50,000, 120,000,
Okay,
they did.
there's no buffer already built in
No.
for those things?
We don't.
Okay, that was the only question I had on Spring Meadows.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? All right, is there a motion, please?
After this one, then I can go to
We'll
Millers
just do,
Point. Yes, ma'am.
we'll just do them one at a time. I know it says consent, but really it should have been separate. All right, is there a motion, please?
I'm sorry. We apologize. You can keep that, ma'am. I mean, you got to leave that when you leave. Yeah, you
I'm so honored, Dr. Fields. Thank you, one and all. I make a motion that we approve the selection of a temporary chiller, rental of a temporary chiller for Spring Meadow Elementary School.
So the motion is by Ms. Eaton, seconded by Ms. Stanford. If you'll go ahead and vote. It's not going, yeah. There we go. All right. Motion passes 4-0. And then the next one is the same for Millers Point Elementary.
Yes, ma'am, with a up to 12 months on this one, and you can see the adjustment for the number in terms of what that one would be. Can you speak real quickly to the exact piece of equipment that you're going to need over at Millers Point?
Be two compressors that were,
Two
need to be
compressors.
replaced, yes, sir.
Got it.
Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm worried about Miller's Point more than Spring Meadows because we already replaced the capacitor for that thing in October of '22. We rented a chiller in August of last year. This is not on bond 2022. Is this thing salvageable, or is this something we need to start thinking that is at the end, reaching the end of its lifespan? My AC guy knows, once we hit a certain dollar threshold, I don't fix it anymore, I replace it, type thing. So this is like a number of more expenses on an older
So
system.
right now, we're working with facilities, and we're looking to see for a cost
Okay.
to replace it. Yes.
Okay, to do a cost-benefit analysis on that one, so we may have a bigger,
I can also say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, I think there's about 4 compressors that are over there,
Correct.
and this would be the down of the 2. So that's what we're looking to replace. This is just temporary to make sure that we have the AC going. But if we were to come in and say we're going to do a whole compressor chiller replacement over there, it would be a considerable amount more. But to your point, once we put so much money into it,
yeah, multiple rentals, a capacitor,
You're
2 compressors, we're going to be over $300,000-$400,000 into this piece of equipment, which is a $600,000 replacement cost, if it's about the same as some of the other ones that we've done at Candlewood and Hartman type thing. So, okay.
one of the
just
things that
something
we
should
really look
think
at, Ms.
about.
Ryan, is how long, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just like your house. If it's been 15 years and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, we need to start looking.
Yeah.
But if it's only 5, 6, 7 years in, you're like, well, can we breathe life into this?
Yeah.
before?
Okay,
So,
all right.
yes, ma'am.
So just something for us to keep in the back of our head that this may be one where
Correct.
we may be looking to go out and
Yes, ma'am.
replace that baby. Okay, those were the questions. And
I
this
was off?
cost of this also coming out of local funds. And then the repairs for it too are going to have to come out of local funds, those 2 compressors?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right. Is there a motion, please? All right, I'll make the motion. I move that we approve the selection of a temporary chiller rental for Millers Point Elementary School. Motion by Ms. Canoyer, second by Ms. Stanford. And if you'll go ahead and vote. And are you a yay or are you a nay, sir? Oh, here it comes. All right, motion passes 5-0. And then finally, our discussion and possible action regarding approval of the selection of a temporary chiller rental for Hartman Elementary School. Dr. Fields?
Yes, ma'am. This is part of the bond for 2022. That's why we had it on here separately. And this would come from bond funds because it's working towards the replacement of that chiller over at Hartman.
Any discussion? Ms. Ryan?
So that anticipated 5 months should be when the new one should be installed by, in theory?
Correct.
It's
Okay,
already on
the
order, I believe.
contractors.
Is it on order, gentlemen?
Yes.
Correct, I think it says we'll get it in fall.
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully 5 months or less, and then get that thing in. All right, thanks, that's all I have.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the selection of a temporary chiller rental for Hartman Elementary School.
Motion by Ms. Ryan, second by Ms. Stanford. And if you will go ahead and vote, please. And motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate all your
Thank you,
hard
guys.
work. All right, back to our regularly scheduled agenda here. We have hold team building, team of 8, evaluating and improving student outcomes training as required by statute, provided by Moat Casey LLC. Dr. Gibson, we're so glad you're with us today.
Glad to be here. And I'm glad that Starbucks decided to build a branch like less than 4 minutes away from here. So they texted this morning and said, "Hey, where are you?" At the Starbucks. And so come down. So anyway, I came down and we looked through the scorecard this morning, which will be great. We had a really good conversation. We're going to share some of that, President Kenoyer, in just a moment.
But you need to get the PowerPoint out.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of a prelude, but we've got a quick PowerPoint. I apologize, trustees, there's not a screen back here, is there? Y'all had to, yeah, and we'll just look at it for just a little bit. And it's really, trustees, it's just anchoring back to some best practices as just following what we've done prior. Don't be afraid of a PowerPoint. I'm just going to click through it. This is, as we've done in the past, this is more about having a good, honest, two-way conversation about the strategic objectives. I do, before I start advancing through that, if I may, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction. And these are just some thoughts that Greg had sitting in Starbucks before coming over here. And last night was a good confirmation of this because we were launching a scorecard in a neighboring district last night. And what I found that we had to do was overcome looking backwards, just to be quite frank with you all, as we were trying to design the next 48 months of work. And so, it's very natural. There's nothing wrong with it, but just to be clear here in a moment, when we start going through this line by line, it's easy to slip back to, well, how did that number get to that number? And why? And believe me, in the last 90 days, we've gone through every one of those why. But the plan is a plan to move forward. And I just feel like that needs to be said. So we can go back and do history lessons, and that's okay. But this is all forward motion. Like everything, we're trying to get forward motion going here. Is that fair enough? And believe me, we've done all the history as a tactical team. We just the data point that some of the data points that will be presented today are just the data points. And you engaged me this past spring, and see, in my mind, I don't care about a data point prior to the data point today as a consultant. That's kind of why you hire a consultant, because
You don't bring any baggage.
I don't bring any baggage. I don't bring any feelings about how the data became what the data is. It's just all, how do we design out of this? And I will tell you this, and I'm going to kind of talk about the cabinet this morning. And, the key here is, it was said several times today in a lot of good conversation, that we're narrowing focus. That's what's paramount. We could look at 1,000 data points at any given moment. We're agreeing to the most important 20 or 30 data points to look at as a team. It doesn't mean those other data points don't exist, and it doesn't mean from time to time trustees might make a request to see the trail of a data point. But if we get in the rabbit hole of how the data became the data, became the data, became the data, I think I told y'all, my friend the mechanic likes, when you roll in with my truck, he plugs it into the computer, right? And he wants to show me 100 screens. I'm like, nope. You show me the one screen that just shows me the big dials. It's hard for these two teams to come together and decide on what the big dials are, but your administrative team has done that over the last 90 days. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't mean that this is perfect today at all. In fact, it's submitted as a draft. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
but it's a draft of 90 days of thinking from your tactical team, if that's okay to say. There's two big outcomes for today, Madam President and trustees. And one is school starts in less than 30 days, I think, or approximately. So I just want to frame this up. And it's not posted as an action item today. So I'm not saying vote on the strategic objectives, but we do want to leave the meeting today with a consensus, that yes, these strategic objectives or you've got it headed in the right direction, and potentially even post it as an action item. I think we were talking about sometime
In the next board meeting.
in the next board meeting, potentially. Now, remember, the reason I feel confident that we can do that is that from the very beginning, we said the board is going to adopt the strategic objectives, not all the actions. So the actions have a lot of moving parts right now, right? Like they just looked at a big bunch of data and I bet they're saying, wait a minute, I don't know if that's the right action or not. And by the way, if that ever stops, you're stuck, Madam President, if they ever stop challenging their own actions. And we're going to talk here in a little bit about what we're trying to build here, and this is the other big outcome for today, is this concept of plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act. And by the way, once you go through the first cycle, I would argue it's plan, do, check, react. Plan, do, check, react. Do you see the first cycle is act? Here it is. Then these cycles moving forward, and that outcome includes having a not definitive, but we got to get closer to a plan for how often the board wants to sit in a strategic roundtable and hear tactical reports on the actions. And it's my strong belief that it's better to do that not on the dais. There can be reports, but if you ask me as a presenter to present to the board and I'm standing at that podium, you're going to get the shortest presentation I got, right? And you're going to get real formal. My slide deck's going to go from 50 down to about 5, and you're going to get, that's not, there is a time and a place for that. What we're talking about is coming down here like we are today, maybe 3 times a year. We talked about earlier today, do a BOY, I'm going to use acronyms, I apologize, but BOY, MOY, EOY, where we do a beginning of the year, which may be September-ish. Like we've got, or at least by October, we've got some BOY data, if that makes sense. Now, this past year's EOY for a lot of grade levels becomes this year's BOY, right? Okay, so that's what we're doing in October is we're calibrating on that. And then for some of our babies coming in, it truly is BOY, right? Like they're taking they're taking the first test they've ever taken, and we're trying to see where they are. So that's new BOY. Then by February, typically middle of the year, we're doing some assessments in December and January, and by February, we've got a big data set. And so there would be another strategic roundtable for an MOY workshop, February-ish. And then kind of like today, you guys are going to share some EOY data. So this time in 2025, August-ish,
Correct.
we would have an EOY report. And then October, does that make sense? BOY October, MOY February, EOY August. And this is the forward motion part, because when does that end? Well, never. I mean, improvement never ends. And so, I mean, arguably, if we get in a good rhythm here, a good operational rhythm between the board and the administrative team, and by the way, I think you got all the pieces in place. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think you've got all the pieces in place. So we don't want to leave today without looking at the scorecard, and we don't want to leave, or I don't want to leave today without us talking about what that BOY, MOY, EOY might look like, and what the board needs from the admin team and what the admin team needs from the board. Fair enough? Are you clicking for me? Is that, okay. This feels powerful. So A lot of this is repetitive, but it's purposefully redundant, and we're going to click through it pretty quickly, but from the beginning, we've talked about we're trying to build a systems perspective. System. Is it well-defined? Is it repeatable? Is it improvable? Process. What are the activities or the actions that we're taking? This is based on total quality management. Deming says that in the absence of a system, we blame people. When we build a system, we get less focus on blaming the people and more on asking the question, what's breaking down in the system? I'm holding up your scorecard. I would argue this doesn't mean that you have a system necessarily, because we haven't made it systematic yet. See, those check-ins, BOY, MOY, EOY, make it systematic. But you can't say we're going to have a BOY, MOY, EOY check-in if you don't know, if we haven't agreed to what we're checking in on. And if that target keeps moving, it'll never work. We've got to try to stabilize the target between the board and the admin team. We've got to get clear about what we're trying. And it doesn't mean, I want to say this first, middle, and last, it doesn't mean that at any time the board might make a very thoughtful decision to recalibrate something on the measure. It's not saying that, but it's to the extent that we can hold this steady for 48 months, let's hold it steady for 48 months. So then the only way for them to go deeper is if we don't move where we're digging.
Right.
Is that the way to say it? Like, if we know where we're digging, then we can get deeper and deeper and deeper and get to the root cause and really, but if the thing keeps moving, we can't keep going deeper and deeper. All right, so that's systems approach. And of course, the colors on your scorecard are trying to improve student outcomes, increase staff morale, community satisfaction, and then I heard earlier ROI, so greater return on investment. It's hard to do a ROI if we don't know what we're trying to accomplish, right? If the target's moving, we can't really do an ROI. But this should set you up well for return on analysis. Now, we'll talk in a little bit. You all, a couple of months ago, right when I got here, I gave you a pop test. Nobody was really that thrilled about it. It's my recollection, because right off the bat, I just said, hey, take this. But I have the results of it for us to look at the very end of it, and it was based on these 6 premises: the belief, mission, vision, systems and processes, progress and accountability, advocacy and engagement, synergy and teamwork, and financial stewardship. Now, with your previous work, I just said don't look back, but I do know you all did a lot of work with Lone Star Governance, and that's great. So y'all were kind of doing this. You were taking, like, where are we as far as a board goes? And then I have the results from that, and at the end of this today, we've got them ready to put them in your hand, and we're going to debrief the results of your good governance inventory. We're going to go through those here in a little bit, but thank you for. Okay, so this is like the big anchor slide. See, everything we're working on right now is down there at the bottom, the tools. And I know sometimes it feels frustrating that why do we keep talking about team trust? Why are we working on this thing or that thing? But if the mindset is not harmonized between the board and the administrative team, you will struggle executing the tool. You see, we have to be of one mindset. And so I'm going to focus more on the mindset and less on the systems framework right now. So we're going to click to just the mindset. And this is the reason for doing this PowerPoint slide, the next slide or two. Maybe that's the end of it. Okay, yeah, that's it.
Team trust.
Okay, so we've talked, so the mindset that we're anchoring to is that we have checked on team trust with the board and for the board. And we've had fruitful and robust conversations as a result of that. And I think, generally speaking, move forward. The concept we have to anchor to that there is a strategic role, the board, there's a tactical role, the administrative team / cabinet, and an operational role, the frontline staff. We have, this can't advance. We can't say column 2 is the strategic column 4 on the other scorecard is the tactical column if we don't agree that there's a strategic role, a tactical role, and an operational role. The next big slide that, and I don't, we're not going to park on team trust right now, and I'm trying to honor y'all's time and kind of get to the meat of the matter and not just do death by PowerPoint here. And I want, as we click through these, look at the last bullet. First and last, board and superintendent, they work on the system. And by the way, in a district this size, I would add superintendent and cabinet, really superintendent's
Yes, sir.
direct reports. Okay, then at the tactical role, it's the superintendent and the leadership team. Now Dr. Fields is in a different meeting, and he's got all the administrators. They work on the system. They help the board in the strategic role, look at the long-range plan, but then they've got to go make a translation to like, here's what we're doing the next year.
Correct.
Because the campuses, like, they will talk to you about 4 years, but they glass over if it's beyond, tell me where our targets are for this coming year. And then, I know you all know this, but 95% of everybody that we're considering right now, they work in the system. That's the operational role. I'm sure I've told you all this. When I started, I wanted teachers to love me. By the end of 21 years, I just wanted them to not roll their eyes when they heard my name. That was good enough. Just don't roll your eyes when you hear my name, and it's good. So that's the concept of the 3 essential roles. This is probably the power slide for this conversation this morning. So we're holding the 3 essential roles over to the left, and then we have to think about this as a plan, do, check, act cycle. Now, Madam President and trustees, I would argue if we agree to this October BOY, February MOY, August EOY, then see we're viewing those 3 time spans of the year as a complete plan, do, check, act. Does that make sense? So we're running a cycle of plan, do, check, act, then we're going to stop. We're going to have a strategic roundtable with the board, recalibrate, and then we start their second cycle between BOY, MOY. I want to pause for just a moment and just see if anything up there resonates with anyone. It is not required by law to do what we are proposing to do. All that's required by law is every January, y'all put it on an agenda, host a public meeting, and hear a taper report of 2- and 3-year-old data. This is much exceeding what is required by law.
But that requirement doesn't get us where we need to be.
That's correct. It is all in the
And
rearview
if-
mirror and just,
And if we want to move forward, then we have to take more action,
and you have to do it faster. And
more often.
More often.
And deeper.
That's correct. So that's a good way to look at it. We're trying to be faster and deeper. We're trying to get out ahead of it. Now, this is where some superintendents, your superintendent has been ready for this the whole time. But, some superintendents will go and hear a presentation at a conference or something. It's like, yeah, I want to do this. And then I just have learned to just ask them right off the bat, are you good with checking in with the board 3 times a year in official workshop setting? Nope. Okay, then you don't want to do this.
Right.
Because this is designed, because see what we're doing is we're saying as an admin team, when we get to the check part of the process, we're going to share it with the board. We're going to just show it. And that doesn't, right, we talked today, it doesn't mean we're just going to show you what we want you to see. We're going to show you that. We're going to show you everything you need to see. That's back to trust, right? If we're going to weaponize data, against each other around the round table, then this will break down. But I would think about my dad as a board president and saying, son, don't tell me something in August that you knew about in February. Get it to me as a board member as soon as possible. We will forgive. What's not forgivable is just last second, hearing it at the last second. Fair enough. So that's why I'm saying this is all a look forward, because and by the way, your team is on board, but they're nervous about it, and I would be too, because it's different, right? We're talking about formal strategic roundtables at 3 junctures. Well, y'all are used to EOY, but it's the BOY, MOY that's the new.
I'd say the difference though now is before the the BOI, MOI, EOI was strictly data-based in terms of academics and universal screeners. This is a BOI, MOI, EOI based on surveys, employee feedback, community feedback, all the other things
Discussions
that,
of the
right.
actions. Also,
So-
in addition to that, we might go, I didn't do a good job splitting that in half. Let me just have a few back this way. This feels very light. Now, once these get in your hand, we run the risk of everything else being over with. So we're just, if we lose them, we'll just go to the scorecard. Okay, I'll just say that because this is the meat of the matter today. But thank you, Dr. Fields, for sharing that. Any other? In fact, we're just going to stop there on the PowerPoint. I want to leave that up as a reminder of what the rest of the work is designing 3 plan, do, check, act cycles between the board and the administrative team. So you can just leave that up on the screen if that, yes, ma'am.
Is your mic? You need your microphone, sorry.
And this is actually a question. This way, it allows us to incorporate our progress that we're making
ma'am.
and results of our tests, as well as the different levels of activities and things that are going on at each individual school, too.
Correct. And I guess probably the biggest difference, you're right, that we've done data reports.
Right.
One of the biggest difference here is, and this is when we say get off the dais and get down here, because the admin team, the tactical team is going to talk about the strategic actions. Usually we just show you, here's the result. We don't say, we tried, and I'm making stuff up here, but we tried Eureka Math, doesn't work. I mean, or it, and the reason why. So here's a pivot, we're gonna pivot, and we're doing that because we just cannot get that number to get off that number. And so we're gonna talk about some of the things that you all may hear at a board workshop at a convention, stay out of the weeds, right? I mean, like that, they can repackage it any way they want to, but that's really what they're saying, like stay out of the weeds. We're saying, come on into the weeds for a little bit, then step back out of them, right? Like we're gonna open it up, like campground's open. Y'all get a pup tent, not an RV.
Well, Dr. Gibson, I've been interestingly listening to your how you're setting the stage on this thing, and naturally I see the reason for it because we've had some challenges lately, but fundamentally though. There are 2 things I think that are causing the issue that we haven't stated, and so I want to make sure I put my input out there. One is we haven't set targets for the superintendent.
Yes.
So without setting targets for the superintendent, we're looking at everything because we don't have anything that says this.
Spaghetti against the wall.
Yeah, it really is. So we're looking at everything. And secondly, like some of my colleagues, we really value input from our employees. I mean, we are legally able to talk through them through a Texas Education Code that allows for 2-way dialogue regarding things that are happening in the district. It is always helpful because it gives us the ability as board members then to have conversations to kind of get through. Some of it could be interpreted as in the weeds because we don't need to know what's happening in the classroom. And naturally, I would never come and put an agenda item what's happening in the classroom because that's clearly outside of our scope. But it enables us as a team to really help move the district forward. So I want to make sure I put that out there too, because I can understand the Lone Star governance approach of being way up here, but it can't take us away from being engaged with parents and with teachers and with any other stakeholder that would have interest in helping us be a better district. Because again, so just keep that in mind as we're talking through this, because I think if we get these goals for Dr. Fields, we can kind of rely on those areas and he knows, okay, this is what the board is really wanting to see for that growth. Would you then say, and I'll ask the question to you, the lack of those goals have been a problem?
Oh, absolutely. And in most organizations, Harvard Business School every year does a review. Most organizations report that they have too many goals or too few goals, right? There's like no porridge.
Goldilocks.
Porridge just right. Like and I thought, too many goals, impossible. And then I went to a district a few months ago, and it's just like that just like strategic plans on every wall. And I'm like, which one is the set? Oh, we do that one for this report, and we do that one. Okay, so but then the opposite may be true here. We don't have clarity of what are these targets. And yes, Mr. Macias, in the absence of that, any conversation about improvements, just talking. I'll just say it that bluntly. Like if we don't have the numbers to show where we are, then it's important conversation, but it's just conversation, right? The 3 check-ins are meant on purpose it's a 48-month plan. Well, I'm going to say it this way. This is a 4-year plan, 3 check-ins. So we're saying in the next 48 months, we're going to do 12 check-ins instead of just 3 check-ins before it's time to renew it. To look at quantify. We talked about that. We talked about the best way to report data to the board today. There were some models we want to show you. Because we're going to show a big chart here in a little bit, and it's great. There's a lot in it, and if I had 2 hours at home, I could draw some inferences from it. But we talked earlier today about the best way to break that data apart and show it so that you can draw an inference almost immediately from the same data chart. Does that make, I can look at it, and I can see. And I don't want to get into that just yet. We will here in a little bit, but we had a really good conversation about that. And so, Mr. Macias, another piece to that is being able to report the data in a way that the board says, okay, that makes sense to me. So we agree to these objectives and these targets. Then how does the board want to see it? We don't want to do death by PowerPoint, and we don't want to do death by Excel, because both of those things exist. I think you were first, and your colleague was next.
Yeah, I think we've got to get out of this new team, right? Like we're stuck in the forming. I feel like we're stuck in the forming stage of, getting this team of, 12, 15, 18, how it varies every single day type thing. And I think with them being comfortable with us being down in the data and the process of the data, because I think that's what helps build trust as you form a team. When you guys are standing up there saying, listen, I've talked to these people, we did this survey, we did this, and this is now what's come out of it, and this is the plan. When you can see, and then we're nodding saying, okay, yeah, I can't think of a box they didn't check. Not our job to think of a box they didn't check, but that starts to instill this level of trust that you guys are going through a process, right? And we're talking to the people, and we're getting the best ideas from everybody, and we're developing these plans, and then this is what the data is showing. I think that's going to go a long way to building this team once the cabinet, don't be afraid to show us data, okay? And don't be afraid of hard questions. It just helps us build our faith, that the district as a whole, not you as a person, that everybody's kind of doing everything we possibly can to get to an outcome that we're hoping for.
Right, and I love the way you just said that. I want to talk about hard questions for just a moment, not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of all the trustees and the admin team that are here. There's a handout, and I didn't load you up with a bunch of paper this time, but it's shifting. And my father helped me with this, and then when I was on the TRS board, I had to learn this. But it's shifting the way the trustees ask the questions from tactical to strategic. And I know the superintendent and cabinet members, if it's a really well-crafted strategic question, okay. So, and I'm not saying you said this, and you teed up this conversation, and I appreciate it, because this is paramount. I know I kind of jokingly said, don't ask why is it painted red, ask what is the process for determining paint color. Maybe I said that or I didn't. That's just a good way to remember it. But as a strategist around the round table, you should ask the tactical team, what concerns you most about this data? Not, I think on line 27, paragraph, do you see, like, it's fair for the strategic team to say, I need to know what worries you, tacticians. What keeps you up at night? Does that make sense?
That's what I've written down. I think I've mentioned this. Another thing is it's always about the so what of the data. Like
That's
we
right.
put a bunch of slides up there. Mary whips through as fast as she can because it's late, it's midnight, type thing. But it's about what is this data telling us as an organization, and then what are you guys doing? But then what are we doing? What can we do? Because we can allocate resources and money.
right.
We can change staffing. We can change policy letters. There's also thinking through that, what is the impact of this 3 to 5 years down the road?
Correct.
Because, so it may seem like, a question that's too deep here, but it's probably because my brain is thinking about what 5 years from now, what's that going to mean to the second graders who are now seventh graders, type thing.
So the earlier conversation for about an hour, at least this morning, was about the reporting of the data in a way that there can, again, I'm repeating myself, but like quick inference.
Yep.
So we can get to the what we're going to do, rather than having to peel back data like here, and if I may, I'll give this and then we'll talk about it here in just a little bit. So we've got third grade math, Judson ISD, 3 years in a row. So we've got a trend, we always talk about trends. That means at least 3 data points, a trend does. So we've got 3 years in a row. So that's one of the first things that the strategic teams needs to see is how has that progressed. Now, third grade math is a different group of kids. So if you want to do apples to oranges, you're looking at last year's third graders, this year's fourth graders, next year fifth grade. Like that's the same. So there's another way to slice the data. Right, it's cohort analysis versus just, year by year. Okay, so that's one distinction that we got to get those kind of broken apart. Then if we see 3 years in a row, that starts helping as a strategy. You're like, okay, see 3 years in a row. What we talked about this morning is putting a line on for the state of Texas average. So in other words, if I have 3 bars, then I've got a line going across showing me where the state of Texas was, and then maybe region 20, since you're kind of right here in region 20. But what we talked about is that you really need to think about other districts all over the state that are more like you than those right around you. So when you do the ESC 20 comparison, okay, that's fine. But then we need to go, and we did a quick
Cohort analysis.
we've got Brainiac back here. She started on it immediately. I only say that with the highest degree of respect because she immediately started showing me districts. I'm like, yeah, but like Colleen, give me Lubbock, Abilene, Copperas Cove,
Right.
Corpus
Believe.
Christi. Do you see, like, those are districts, and what I'm not saying this is the final decision, but we were doing, tell us what was the 5 things we were looking at?
We were looking at not the enrollment side, but the program numbers, SPED, at-risk, ELL, ECODIS numbers, comparable.
Does that make sense? Like, that's who you should really look at statewide for a comp.
Not the neighboring districts.
For a
per
comp.
se.
There are a few neighboring districts that
We
maybe-
could, but I
maybe.
mean, if we're focusing on Shirt-Cibolo,
That's not.
we don't look like Shirt-Cibolo.
And I said the same thing at Shirt-Cibolo. We're at 30% low SES, they're at
Oh, 63.
60, yeah, we're at half of that, and we're going to compare it? That's preposterous. So let's compare to Rockwall, Tomball. Do y'all see, like, all the Lake Wiley and Dallas, like that? That's who, and by the way, no one was that thrilled when I brought a comparison group in that situation and drew a line on the bar graphs, and now we're underperforming. With one line on a bar graph, we went from overperforming to underperforming, and everybody was not thrilled with me. But isn't that who we should be? Now, y'all's situation is different. It's like the flip of that. So then we're trying to say, let's go grab a comp group that we can all agree to as a tactical and strategist team, strategic team on the right comp group. Just like we said, we can have a lot of wobble and movement. We need to settle on that comp group, and we need to stick to it, right? Because if that red line on those charts has got to mean the same thing every time you go through a BOY, I'm sorry, those will mainly be on EOY because we won't have BOY, MOY comps. but that annual EOY will start sharing those comps.
And we won't be able to compare to them in every category that we're
That's
listing
correct.
on our scorecard, because some of
Right,
this
this
is internal.
is your priority one
Right.
comp group, then you'll
Correct.
probably have a priority two different comp group, because when you're.
Which may include neighboring districts, because we're talking
it's
about
salary and
something. Right.
compensation and all of that. Does that, 'cause so it's, we have to, there's two different comp groups, one for yellow part, one for the orange part, and then, right here, these two teams. They're going to give you rationale for why they're proposing the ones that they are. Good conversation here, but that has to be an absolute team of 15 consensus, not vote, because only the board votes, but there has to be consensus that that's how we're picking our group. And from the board standpoint, I think it needs to be 100% of the board members say, yes, that's a good group. Because if we're going to use that every single year, we can't go back and rehash. I just think it's the wrong comp group, right? We got to keep that target steady.
For clarification purposes, were you asking who chooses the priorities or who chooses the comp group? Oh, the groups? We can make a recommendation. We can show you why we think that they compare to our district the best. And then if there's a, right.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, because the whole thing kind of breaks down if we don't reach agreement on the comps, right? We have to have agreement between the strategic team and the tactical team on the comps. I said I wasn't going to go there, but I went there. Mr. Macias, you set it
Ms.
up.
Stanford is first.
Yeah.
and then-
Microphone, ma'am.
So talking about getting into the weeds, I envision the relationship between the board and the cabinet and superintendent as kind of a seesaw, and getting it perfectly balanced is almost impossible. It's a challenge. Yeah, we're constantly, tipping one way or the other, and I find that's where I struggle, is where are we tipping? But since I have to vote on a budget and vote on strategic goals, I care about what goes into them. Now, how deep do I need to go into the data? I don't know, but I appreciated your saying sometimes we have to step into the weeds to understand, because I care about our grades and where Eureka might be helping or not helping, for example.
Correct.
And I think the board needs to know that, because we're constantly voting to approve or fund these things. So that's where I find a challenge, is how much information do
Well,
I need to decide?
So one oversimplified way to answer that is however much you can squeeze into a 3-hour workshop 3 times a year. Right, now there's always meetings in between, but the purpose of those 3, nothing else on the agenda. I know you got to approve an air conditioner every now and then. It takes 5 minutes, I get that, okay.
Sorry.
But no, I fully expected it this time of the year. We approved some air conditioners last night, we'll approve some more tonight. But the purpose of the workshop setting is to give time to have those discussions, is my point. And if you don't build them into the calendar, then we're saying we got to get all this data and information from the dais. It's not going to happen. If with just reports,
Yeah.
you got to get down here and you got to have tacos and coffee on a Saturday morning and do your BOY report.
But I'd also say this, though, Ms. Stanford, I love the question. We also have to give it time to marinate. We got to do the EOY, and then we got to wait on the MOY. But we can't disaggregate between BOY and MOY, because it takes us away from doing the due diligence to get to where we
good.
need to get for MOY.
That's right.
So we kind of need time to get to that next check.
You need time to do the do before you do the check.
Correct.
And
But if we're always checking, yeah,
okay.
you go.
Well, if you're always checking, then you got to let the tactical, they got to go do the do.
Well, is there kind of a standard time frame that when you?
BOY, MOY, EOY, to me is that works for you all,
Correct.
doesn't it?
That's it.
I think those are good, you've got.
And on some of these, you're going to see that we don't even have an established baseline. So some of them, we're going to have to develop the survey to go back and say, what does parent satisfaction look like?
Yeah.
Let's put that out there on a survey, and then at the end of the year, be able to come back and determine whether or not we've made progression in that area.
That's a big part of this. This is a starting point from here forward, so we got to get baseline data. This
So
is
the
long
survey,
game.
in the creation of a survey, can the board have any input in that? Like questions that they would find would be helpful to get from the?
We would have no problem with that at all. We would ask that you let us go back and develop what we feel like we need to determine to be able to
Share.
say whether or
Almost
not we're
like the
there.
comp group,
And then
right?
if you, correct,
Yeah.
if you see something that's not in
Wanna
there
add.
that you really want measured, then say, hey, can we look at this as well? And then we can add that in as a question before we put it out to the community.
That's a great example of the caliber. I love this, and this doesn't always happen. What's happening right now? I'm looking at you, Madam President, because sometimes everybody's so eager to start, they don't calibrate on how they're going to do, how they're going to start. This is that measure twice, cut once. Like if we get agreement between the two teams, then the harmony is a lot easier. If I may, real quickly, Mr. Macias, I just looked at you and it reminded me when visiting staff members, and one of the things that we tried to do when trustees, so as part of the priority 2 strategies, we had staff advisory groups, and then I rounded, with elementary, you'll have to think about what that would look like. And then I invited trustees to go with me on less than a quorum on those trips. So they were hearing these organized meetings where we were talking about progress on 1.2 or progress on whatever. And there were a lot of superintendents that said, you're crazy. Not every trustee wanted to do that, but there were those that said, hey, I just want to go hear what it sounds like right from a teacher's mouth. So that didn't mean that the board member, in fact, the deputy superintendent ran those meetings.
We did it this year, I believe. What was the school that we went to where we invited the board members to go with us? And Ed France.
Right, part of this may be making those opportunities a couple of times in the spring, a couple of times in the fall, and then say trustees, I always ask the trustees to go, don't just go where you want to go, but go somewhere that you've never gone. Like go see something that you've never, like they always want, I want to go to this elementary school because it's where I went to elementary school. Okay, nothing's changed. It's the same. Let's go to one of the newer ones, or let's go to the one that we just remodeled. But anyway, I feel like, if I may, that is an additional opportunity for the board during the do part of it. Does that make sense? Like the check is coming, but we can go see some of the doing. It just needs to be systematic, right? So it needs to be part of the process.
Yeah, helps us see your process.
That's right. Let's go see what it looks like.
That increases. We see what y'all do when you go to France. We're like, oh, okay, well, now that makes sense. I see what you guys are going out and about and doing, and
Apple, the company Apple now, after Steve Jobs, they allow the board to go watch phones being made. And it doesn't mean they're down there making the phone, but they're just sitting in this boardroom and they don't know that there's 957 different stations where everybody puts one microchip in. And so they go down there to just go, oh my gosh, this is complicated. No wonder they cost, whatever they cost, right? So they're not going down there to build a phone or even tell the person how to build a phone. They're just going down there to watch how the phone is built. And it's like, okay, now I get it when we're talking about that at the.
In the company, to have more identity.
That's correct.
And understanding of who you're serving.
That's correct. And everybody gets afraid of, the board member gets in that situation and starts telling the guy or the gal how to make the phone. And that as long as we know the strategic role and tactical role, we can do this. It's the strategic role going to watch how the thing is built, watch how a kid learns to read, watch how a kid learns how to do math, watch how a kid learns the English language, right? Like, I just want to see it.
Well, I've been waiting to say my point, but there's a couple things. Ms. Ryan had mentioned about we have the ability to allocate funds, change staffing, and I understand that we do strategically, but we also have to be very careful. I always think of it this way: if the management of the district can allocate staffing, that's all in their world, not ours. Now, we get a chance to have an opportunity to talk about it, like you said, a couple times a year, where we're looking at our budgets and we're looking at a report, but that's where we would do it best in terms of how I think the board governance should work. So just wanted to put that out in the universe. The other one is, another example that came up was Skyward. And these are real examples that happened in this district. There was, the previous administration had some challenges implementing Skyward that caused a lot of issues. We heard a lot of feedback on that. And so I put it on the agenda, not because I wanted to scratch or anything, just what more can we do to address the concerns we're hearing from our employees and work through that. And I think that's a perfect example of what that two-way dialogue is supposed to do, because it's supposed to alert administration, hey, we're having some challenges. But that's also to Ms. Ryan's point too of oversight. Our job is to be that oversight on how are we spending our resources and making sure they're being spent appropriately. And Skyward was purchased with not the right foundational pieces, it looked like. I mean, I don't know, because I didn't get in there and look at the whole thing,
Right.
because that's not my job. My job is just to recognize from our community there was some challenges.
So I want to point out a couple of things here, and thank you for using that specific example. So heretofore, you all have had reports systematically only on things in the yellow, because that's required by law. You've got to have your HB3 goals, you've got to have your, the peach, I called it orange the other day, my wife said, that's peach, and so I guess it's peach. But the peach and the blue and the green, there's some aspect of the green that's required by law, first report and what do you call it, audit every year. But what you're building here is a system. So when we say 3 times a year, I know I keep looking at the curriculum because that's what I was. But we're talking about a scorecard of the peach and the blue and the green also. So the peach is what we're talking about using the Skyward example, right? That's staff satisfaction, like something's wrong. I'm going to challenge the tactical team moving forward to beat the strategic team to any concern that the board is hearing about, because they know that before. And so you tell the board president, we are aware, I'm just going to extend off of your example, that there's an issue with the data management system, and we're putting that on our MOY report, in February. Let's say it's December and we're hearing that, do you see what I'm saying? Like
I hear what you're saying, but I want to be clear as well. There's certain ways to bring that out. I get calls from you guys all the time, and you'll say, hey, I heard that, or what's going on with. That is the easiest phone call to manage. Pull in the person, the subject matter expert. Hey, are you guys aware? It's non-confrontational. When you get it on a board agenda item with a lot of questions associated with it,
that's not as good a way to do it.
that's not,
Yeah.
So now we're going in trying to play defense on what are we looking for, what are we not. It's not a look into. So I'm cool with the look into, but if it's going to be a challenge.
The report part of it, thank you for saying that, Dr. Fields, is not meant to take the place of that. It's in addition to that, but it is a checkpoint where we can just say,
love it.
That mid-year, whatever might be low because we had that problem on that thing. That's why that data is low.
And one more thing, a lot of people know you guys, so if they have a concern, they're coming to you. I love that, but then I would ask you to give us an opportunity to address it, as opposed to getting into a deep discussion about it. Even direct them back towards us. Because there's no retaliation. I understand that we're trying to climb out of that hole, but the only way we get out of that hole is when people see, if I come with a concern, there was no retaliation. They just looked into it.
And so trustees, you've hired a set of tacticians that no one in the district knows better negative unintended outcomes than your tacticians. So it seems like problem. Let's solve it, let's move on. This team knows that as soon as you do that, you got 8 more problems. Like, it seems simple, but is that a fair statement? Like, y'all have to think about like every ripple effect to it, if I may say.
And there's just 2 fundamental concerns I have with that. And granted, Dr. Fields has been amazing in addressing his concerns, and I have all the confidence in this administration. They are responsive when there are calls made. But 2 things that concern me is, one is that sometimes we have to close the loop. We can't operate outside of this boardroom. So if we're doing something and I say, hey, I've heard X, Y, or Z, and I put it on the agenda, it's so that we can have that full, transparent conversation that we've had discussion, administration's on it, we're going to take care of it. It's done in open rather than behind closed doors, and that's important for our community. That's the political part that we're in. Are we being responsive? Are we being transparent? And we need to do that. That's why I'll put things on the agenda, just to close the loop, not to slam you guys down, but to find other ways to talk to my colleagues. Because the other part is, when I have my one-on-one conversation with you, the whole board isn't involved in that conversation. So I would like to have my colleagues involved in us strategically talking about it. It safeguards, if I was a bad board member and I told you I wanted to do that, we have a group that's working together to address those issues. So those are the two reasons why I would want to potentially see it on an agenda so we can work through it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Right.
not a surprise gotcha type thing. Yeah, it's not
One,
that.
and we're not off track, but we're getting close to the outcome of today. I'm not saying it's not a worthy conversation. I know some districts, and I can't remember if we talked about a clear communication matrix, so that if, and we don't have to have this conversation today, but if individual trustees say, hey, this is a concern, can you look into it? Then the superintendent gets someone to work on it. Then the disposition is made available to all the other trustees to see what the question was and then what the response was. And then I think a lot of them y'all may already do that.
We try and be very
Okay.
consistent.
Okay,
with that.
well, I'm not saying
When
that.
it comes to us, though, but oftentimes,
It's just another tool in the tool belt to try to just keep, because you're right, Mr. Macias, if the board member that asks the most questions is potentially the board member that has the most information, right? So we've got to try to build a system where, where
Everybody gets it.
everybody gets the information. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
But, too, Dr. Gibson, it helps tremendously when, like if I have a question, I send it to superintendent, and we have a policy with our board, I don't know if it's a policy or rule or whatever, but if one board member sends Dr. Fields a question, then he sends it out to whatever staff member needs to address it. But all the board members get not only the question, but we receive the answer.
Right, that's the best.
What's
practice.
frustrating sometimes is when one board member or two board members are micromanaging the staff.
Right.
They're trying to answer our question, and we're getting an answer from a board member that's totally different from the answer we're getting from the staff, and it's getting put out into the community. Now, here we are trying to backpedal, or at least for me, and determine, okay, what do I need to support to answer my community members' question when they ask me? And that's so frustrating.
So what, ma'am, if I may, so if in my absence of this last 30 days, if I understand it, you all adopted a good governance handbook that codified what I believe to be some of the best practices for the board to make a commitment to staying in the strategic role, to following a system of data reports. Is it perfect? Probably not, but do you start by just getting one adopted and then having conversations about?
And that was what we did at our last board meeting is we adopted a handbook and we talked about every year we will re-adopt it, and during the year, if things aren't working, that can come up and we can make changes during the year, or if it's something minor, it can wait until we re-adopt at the beginning,
And
the
it's not-
next year.
And so that,
Every June.
that handbook is just the best way the board can vote and have in writing their commitment to this process is one way to look at it. Like if we're gonna, let's just be real. Y'all feel like something's about to change. If you're gonna do a BOY, MOY, EOY workshop with just open dialogue, that has a different feel, right?
That's different than what we've done.
That's different than what you've done.
Is that good for you guys? Oh, yes. Okay.
Well, is it okay?
Yeah, of course.
Y'all talk about it, because I point over there and I start saying what y'all are saying. Just talk about it a little bit.
The conversation we had this morning is, that feels a lot more organic. And it feels like it's not one person reporting on data and one person trying to find a solution. And then it also feels like sometimes when we're just reporting on data, we spend 90% of the time talking about the problem and 10% of the time talking about the solution. Where just a cursory glance at the data, and now let's dig in, all of us together as a collective group, talking about this is the solution we want to move forward. I had made the comment when it was just us that I think the beautiful side effect to this scorecard is it brings credence and validity to those who have dedicated their life to the classroom. Because now we're making a conscious decision to sit here as a group and talk about the hard work that takes place every single day in the classroom. Whereas if it's just going through the PowerPoint slide, right? Mary's standing over there, we're all standing over here. I think there's something, as Dr. Fields would say, there's meat left on the bone there. And teachers want to feel validated. They want to know this is the goal, we're all moving in this direction, and their hard work is seen and valued, and it's said openly in a public space. That's just me, that's how I feel.
Well, there's a goal, there's a goal, there's an endpoint in mind, a clear target.
A friend of mine, well, a couple of them, but, and I hope you find this comical. A couple of my friends that are educators and part of cabinets in other school districts, we've talked, and one of them said to me that in looking at our board meetings, he's watched a couple of them. He says, it seems like you guys, you seen that game at an amusement park where you jump, you got the suit on with the sticky thing and you jump, and you slam yourself up against the wall. And he says to me, he says, it's like you guys got your superintendent in that suit and he's just jumping, and he slams himself against the wall trying to see what's sticking because stuff is coming like just out of nowhere, and he's never given an opportunity to get down off the wall to answer the doggone question. Even the cabinet can't pull him down. And I was like, wow, I never thought of it that way, but, and they agreed, it's been a lot of stuff that's just, since you became the superintendent, it's like constant barrage of arrows as opposed to boomerangs or something where at least it comes back to the board or the staff to come up with a solution. And it's like it happens and then we just move on. We don't solidify an answer or solution.
I truly appreciate that, Ms. Eaton. I would say this. We don't mind the arrows, really. Matter of fact, we kind of like them because it allows us to focus a little bit. What I would say is the barrage of it. And in addition, this document truly, if when agreed upon, allows us to say, okay, we're going to go from here to here. How's that working? Are we making progress? What do we have to do? We can develop a plan in each one of these categories, and then we don't have to worry about some of the other arrows because the only arrows that should be coming are the ones that are on this sheet, and they ought to be a priority. Now, I'm not saying that other things won't come up, especially as an emergency of sorts. But now with
if they're going to hit your ankle, let them hit, right? Because now we know what's at the heart.
exactly.
We're protecting the vital organs here.
I know that that's needed to kind of help, because how are we going to know what's working and not working as far as the reaction from our students, from our staff?
Right.
This
If
gives us-
we don't get the feedback, if the staff doesn't get the feedback, if the superintendent doesn't get the feedback, that's the only way we can improve, that's the only way we can make changes. And it's not to just, pivot right away, but hey, like, is Skyward working? Did it give us what we wanted as far as the data? Did it help us? Are we moving in a direction to benefit the district?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and the
you
thing
need the
is,
feedback from the staff.
so let me, y'all's two comments made me think about something that I wanted to say. And this was about a month ago when they were talking about the BOY, MOY, EOY reporting. There's a board in the state that when we were sitting here, they're going to generate a document from each one of those meetings of strengths and opportunities for improvement collectively from the cabinet and from the board. I mean, like, how great, and I got chills when they were like, we have to show a collective commitment that we reviewed all this today and we agreed these were some strengths and then these are some things that we need to adjust in the next cycle. And we're agreeing to it. So that means there's got to be time at the end of the meeting for one-offs to be talked about, because that's kind of what we're talking about. We've got to calibrate one-offs and make a collective commitment to opportunity. You would be okay with opportunities
Oh, yeah.
for improvement coming out of that, right?
Yes,
Because
sir.
there's clear direction towards these targets. It's almost like a formative evaluation. I'm not saying.
I'm loving it.
But it's similar to that, right? Like I got a little walking orders. I'm a superintendent. We got some opportunities for improvement. I'm going to talk about them, right? As a superintendent, we're going to talk about those. All right, does that make sense? And then if ever, again, this is, trustees, are you ready to do something different? Let me just ask it that way.
So let's get some consensus. What I like about the opportunity to have these 3 meetings is it gives us truly a chance to really discuss what's being presented. In a board meeting, we have that much time to actually talk about what's presented. So we get an overview of data, and then there's follow-up questions that come later, but it's not with the entire
Try to close
board
the
and the
loop.
cabinet.
Yep.
Closing the loop, as Mr. Macias referred to. So I personally am okay with that. Can I get some consensus from the rest of the team here about these 3 meetings? Is this something you're willing to commit to?
Yes, at least 3.
Yes?
Right. We'll start with
Yes,
3.
yes.
Yeah, we'll
Start with 3. I'll do as many as y'all want to do.
Because I think some of these initial meetings are going to be helping to set the baseline without as much discussion. So it may be that, we feel that there's an opportunity in, let's say, January to talk about one particular thing, and we could add a meeting in then later about when we get all this and looking
It's
at
a really-
timelines.
Yeah, if they don't line up to when we
So
get
what-
certain data
Right.
points
Right.
in, there may have to be
So
3
that-
long ones and 2 short ones, right?
The point the president is making, the first set of these
Mm-hmm.
with respect to the
Not the
la-
yellow.
Not the yellow, thank you, is going to be starting, not
Right.
fixing stuff, but agreeing to the baseline. Is that, we talked about
Correct.
that earlier today. So the first one can't be like, let's fix it all. It's got to be
Right.
about agreeing to how do we get the data? What are the questions on the survey, right? Like, that's what we talked about earlier.
I wanted to add something. Basically, I agree with the concept, but it does remind me of a little thing that we were thinking about this last year, about having 2 meetings. We've talked about that possibility of doing that, but the danger with that is that we could potentially have 2 long meetings, and nobody wants to have 2 long meetings. So just putting it out there, and this is not the right forum, but just putting it out there consistent with what this evolution is looking like. Maybe we do eventually have, like some bigger districts do, where it's just a 2 or 3 hour meeting, no voting, just information, and then have the actual voting meeting. But I think at some point, most larger districts like SAISD, they have 2 meetings because there's too much information, it's too big. We're going to get to that point potentially, and so we should probably be thinking about it in the long term about how we would do it. But I do appreciate this innovative, yeah, I like
Like an
to
informational meeting.
Yeah.
and then a
Correct.
more traditional.
The action meeting.
Yeah, yes. I think these, I think we're agreeing to this, but these need to be just a workshop.
Workshops,
Like we're talking
right.
about workshops with this.
With no action taken, just
Correct.
information
Like,
and discussion.
Knowing full well you might have to put an air conditioner chiller on a building at the big, okay. That
But
happens.
when it comes to the scorecard, this is informational.
That's
What we're
correct.
doing is saying, this is the target we set, this is how we're moving towards that target, or we're actually moving away from the target, and now we talk about what we need to adjust to get
I
closer
think the
back to.
product of it is not a vote, but
Right.
maybe this chart of consensus between the 2 teams on
Right.
the strengths, the opportunities for improvement.
Correct.
And maybe there's a 3rd column that's just changes we've agreed to make, right?
Well, and it gives the staff time too. If we talk about things like reallocating resources, costs, changing policy letters, it gives the staff some lead time to go back and not Ceci with a calculator in the middle of a board meeting when we're trying to vote, and she's like, I think it's 332,004 cents. Like, that's not the best way. If
No,
we
you're-
talk about it in the workshop with the plan, then the staff can go back and get us all the details, and then we're voting on
So
it at the next
The
meeting.
consensus could be that we're charging the staff with doing the analysis for the
Right.
meeting. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with
Correct,
you.
and then we have all the data when we vote, everybody knows the numbers,
But the-
nobody has used their iPhone to do math.
I just want to be clear, we're not voting.
Correct.
We're
No,
just
no, no,
voting
I'm
back.
saying, no, giving some guidance so that you can come back at the next meeting with a.
With a
If
recommendation
you
that
want to
might
do
need a vote.
X, this is literally what it's gonna cost. Like, we've done the math of it.
So I'm gonna
Then we
get-
can vote on it at the next regular board meeting.
So I know, like, you're wanting to go around, and I'm
No,
interrupting that.
I got an okay. I got
Well, I
nods
do-
from
I do
everybody.
know-
I'm
I
okay
have
with
a
that,
question.
but Ms. Stanford wanted to say something.
And if I may,
so.
Ms. Stanford, and I'm going to say this, and then we need to get off of
Yeah.
it. But when you do the MOY scorecard report in February, in March, this is an unsolicited recommendation that I think could address some of the things that I've observed just as our worlds have just kind of intersected here. March of 2025 is when you need to have your first budget workshop. You need to have all the important decisions made by mid-May. June needs to be strictly getting final numbers, tax rate numbers, all the decisions. This is unsolicited, no one needs to respond, but if we're doing a systems approach, we've got to back up a lot of the important decision-making, because at the end, it should just be fine-tuning, if that makes sense. Like, we should just be tweaking and fine-tuning. We've talked about this, there's some tools for this.
Yes.
So I'm not just dropping it cold on the superintendent right now, but there's tools to back that up. I just want you all to know that. Yes, ma'am.
So we're required, aren't we, to have a certain percentage of our meeting hours dedicated toward student outcomes?
Well, that
Not
was-
legally,
Right.
that's
that
Not legally.
Which is part of Lone Star.
That's Lone Star governance.
Okay, because I feel like we've not been able to really focus much on student outcomes for quite a while. So would these workshops then allow us to super focus
Yeah.
on student outcomes?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
That we can then mention more briefly in the board meeting itself?
Yes.
Would this allow us to really dive into it and
And you-
more
I-
deeply?
That's why I like the concept of that written agreement at the end of it, because that's what you're sharing at the regular meeting when everyone's watching online.
Yeah.
We met for 3 hours, we went through all four, the strengths are just a wonderful opportunity then to celebrate some things that we hit at the regular meeting. We're celebrating those strengths, and, oh, by the way, we found some opportunities for improvement. We reached consensus on those, and here's what they are.
So the BOY, MOY, that's all student outcomes, or does that involve
No,
budget
ma'am.
too?
This is the entire scorecard. That involves
All of these.
students and their performance, staff and how they feel, stakeholders and how they feel satisfied, and stewardship of long-range planning goals, all of this stuff.
And I
So,
almost feel like you
MOY, BOY, on all of this?
Yes.
Okay, that could be a long
But
meeting.
budget is separate. Budget is separate.
Yes.
Those are, that's a whole different
Separate meetings.
operation.
But there's a
Okay.
little bit
We
of.
talk about money in this, but when we do budget, that's separate from this.
Correct. But you've had arguably two BOY, MOY to
Right.
think about allocation of resources, right? And that
Right.
we'll
As
probably need to
part
have.
of those
As part of
conversations.
those conversations, back to what Ms.
We'll have
Ryan
that
said.
data.
Then like we're putting a pin in it to be ready for that budget workshop right over
Correct.
at MOY is what I'm
Good,
saying.
I think we really needed this, so.
Well, and you, I think, just be real, like, let's say it's a 3-hour meeting, a half of it needs to be on the yellow stuff. Okay, and then the other half of it for the other 3. That's just off the top of my head. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes. That's our focus, is
That's
student
your
outcomes.
mission.
It's our laser
Your mission is the yellow. But it takes the other 3 to make
Make
the
the
mission,
yellow.
to make the yellow work.
But we spend so much time in the other 3 and not enough focus on the yellow.
Yeah.
That this year, there's a pivot for that.
Yeah.
Good.
And from the day one convocation administrative summit, this needs to be the focus.
Which, did you get enough head nods
Yeah,
going
I got
around?
head
Okay.
nods.
Okay.
Everybody's on. So I'll task Ms. Holmes with creating dates.
So so the concept here then, to the point of what you just said about school start and all that.
Yes, sir.
I think you guys are ready to start messaging. Like we got convocation coming, we got this opportunity coming to start. And so is the board comfortable enough, it's going to get a little wonky, but the outcomes are updated, and you guys want to talk about those in just a second, but then there still are some blanks. Are you comfortable with adopting this with blanks in it, knowing that as we do these meetings, the blanks are going to get filled in? Because what they mainly need is the strategic objectives and the 4 priorities adopted, if that makes sense. See, they got to start.
That's our oversight.
Right, and they got to start messaging. I can see a
Correct.
PowerPoint at convocation, like, here's where we're going,
Correct.
I see all those things, but, and not today, but, like, I think y'all were thinking in the next 30 days, is that right? Consideration for action item on this? Yes.
Are you saying that we're already accepting these particular goals that happen to be on, because we've not really discussed them,
No, that's, the rest of
today.
today is for that purpose.
on the particular goals for student outcomes?
Correct. Well, not
The
only
actual
student
numbers.
outcomes, I'd like to start with 2, 3, and 4, and then have 1 be the last one we talk about, because if we get into 1 first, we'll never get to 2, 3, and 4. So if we
Okay.
could start with 2, basically what we're saying here, and keeping in mind that strategic objectives, this is what we agreed to in our last workshop. We said that faculty and staff recruiting and retention was a concern. So we went back and said, well, we want to decrease the number of vacancies in all areas. We're going to get a baseline for that by August of 2024. And then once we get the baseline, we'll know where we need to go by 2028. Then we also said the number of employees attaining degrees, we're going to get a baseline for that, but that's going to be more in spring of 2025 than it would be in August of 2024, because we're going to have to look at a cohort of people, and you guys, this is when I need y'all to start jumping in your areas. Look at a cohort of people that we're looking at. We're not talking about just across the district. We're talking about those interested, how we're catapulting them and getting them to that. And then, and all of this is related to recruiting and retention, and then teacher turnover rate. We know that one was one that we could calculate now. We know that we're at about 21.3, and then we want that down to 20% by 2028. Then we'll provide additional calculations to include retirements, military transfers, and so on.
You'll have to adjust for military here. We did an SCU.
Right.
Because
So-
we can't, some of those are outside of our.
But these are suggestions right now, they're open for discussion.
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to be sure of that with the student outcomes, that all of those particular goals aren't already decided.
No, they're not decided.
They're all- okay.
That we're looking to get back to, again, I would say we need to come back to the student goals.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
let's focus, because if we're okay with what we just went over for recruiting and retention, then now we can move to faculty and staff engagement and satisfaction. How are we going to evaluate that?
Yeah.
And the first one we have is the staff survey results. We've got a TASB survey, or we could use Dr. Gibson's survey. And then once we, or a combination of both. And then we'll have an outcome measure. We'll put a percentage next to that and as a baseline in September of 2024. And then we'll know what we need to work towards 2028. And all of this is towards 2028. It's 4 years out. And then increased opportunities for district-wide participation in wellness activities. Now we can start talking about all of the health fair when we do convocation.
And any type of opportunity we provide our employees from a district level to participate in something that will increase their well-being. Sorry.
She needs the microphone, Ms. Stanford.
Thank you. So that would include anything that the district is putting out there for its employees to strengthen their well-being, because we do know that working in education can be stressful, and so that is important. Just as we look at SEL for students, we want to make sure that well-being for our employees is up there as well.
And then on the next one, faculty and staff capacity building, We're looking at the number of promotions into leadership positions, create a baseline for that, where we want to be by 2028, and number of teachers awarded designated status through TIA, and Dr. Saunders, if you wanted to speak on what designated status means for TIA.
So we roughly talked about TIA a while back. The surrounding districts have all engaged in it, where we already got our application approved. We'll be ready to start data collection and submitting our data to the state at the end of this year, and then teachers will receive a designation, which is coupled with a bonus given from TEA based on their performance of student growth.
What is TIA?
Teacher incentive allotment.
I had this thought on, we talked about this one time, doing a key of acronyms, or either try to get the acronyms out of this, or do a key at the end of it. Either way, it's helpful because we want this thing to point out on the
Right.
website eventually, and
To the community, anybody who
And they
can
don't
pick it
know.
up and
Yeah.
know what
Yeah,
our
anybody.
focus is.
correct.
And then the last one is have the tools and resources to do my job. We put out a satisfaction survey on that as well. Yes, ma'am.
On surveys, I don't know how many you do, but there seems to be a challenge when you do a survey. Someone's got to assess the data, distill it, get it in categories, like our teacher retention or satisfaction survey that was done. I moved it to next month because we still have to assess the results, and we've had it for a while. So I don't know how many surveys we're talking about, but is there a way to, once we have it, to, in a reasonable amount of time, to assess it
Yeah,
and distill it?
We didn't, I'm sorry.
well, that's okay.
Point of correction. We didn't do a survey on teacher satisfaction. What we did was we had focus groups on teacher satisfaction. And I think we've come back and briefed those several times to the board. So that's what we were, I'm sorry?
That's what I was going to, and so I was going to touch on that. If we can, by the way, focus groups and surveys are both best practices. So it doesn't have to be one over the other one. It can be both. The survey, if we get the staff, if we have a staff survey and then a teacher survey, if that's what it's going to be, or if it's just going to be the staff survey, when you're looking at the measures on this, let's say there's 15 questions on it.
Correct.
Maybe 3.2 uses question 3, question 5, and question 8 as its measure. Do you see like those 3 questions line up
With that.
to a different piece on here? So you're extrapolating out a subset of questions, and then your big overarching satisfaction might be just the mean of all of them together.
Not sending a survey for each question individually.
Correct. So it's not like another survey, another survey, another survey. You see like,
Crafting the survey is key then.
where that's
Yes,
why you
ma'am.
all said
That's
you were
why
going
we're
to do it
saying,
together.
until we agree that this is how we're going to march out, it's difficult to go back and sit and craft a survey, and we don't even have agreement on whether or not this is how we want to measure.
And then once we come up with the survey, then
We'll come back and
how
show
do
the
we
survey before
assess it?
we
How do we distill it? How do we
Yeah.
analyze it and come out with?
Do you have
the-
a third party to do the data?
We do. On some, we do. Some we wanted to do in-house. It's just that we wanted to get some clarification from the board as to whether we can move forward in these areas. You know what I'm saying?
Since COVID, unfortunately, third parties for this have gotten more expensive because everybody's surveying now. But I always felt like that was a
But we
really
do.
good
We got-
investment. Well, I always felt like that because you're getting a neutral
Exactly.
third party.
And it'll
You-
be consistent.
Well, you
annually.
can use artificial intelligence also internally. I mean, you can use AI. Now, people say the web is biased, so you have to be careful, but you can use AI to just draw, to take the human element out of the people that are in charge of it and just let artificial intelligence.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I know on some of these things, we're trying to start with new baselines, but I also don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because some of these metrics we have been measuring consistently over time. Every single spring, we have done the TASB staff survey, and we have constraints and goals and things that are directly, and we've been watching that linearly, is that a word? Over time. And so, and turnover rate on the taper, and we've done 4 iterations of our student and family survey. So we've got some great existing data points that I'm concerned that, are we just going to throw all that out and start over? And then how does this turn into this year's superintendent
Gotcha.
evaluation instrument? Because we went off, we just did a generic one last year, but January, we're going to be up on the 1 year, but if
Right.
we don't have any baseline data, how do we turn this into
Two
anything?
important questions. One of them is, and this is going to seem a little squishy, but it's my best answer. Look at the historical information. This is kind of where I started today. Look at the historical information. This has to be truthfully a launch point going forward, because especially if you are going to recalibrate the questions. You see, that's a different set of questions. I want to be clear. I'm not saying completely ignore the past information. It may be that that's a slide on the slide deck while you're moving forward. It's important to glance back at that. But I want to be clear, we're talking about clean slate, new survey, new comparison group. Generally speaking, we're kind of talking about this starts, which brings to the second question, which is really good. The superintendent evaluation. This year one, and I would even argue 18 months, and Mr. Macias and I had this conversation initially way back in the spring, should be, I believe strongly, an entry plan where the board is evaluating the superintendent on the structure built, not on the data points, on the structure built. In other words, the
scorecard, putting this together, what are we going to do going
I would even say the key
forward?
strategic actions.
Right.
Like the internal one, like when you're reporting to the board, even though we're going to do a BOY, MOY, EOY, you may, if your evaluation's in January, is that right? So you may be giving a report on some of the stuff that they may not even be hearing until MOY, because you're tying it back to, here's how we're doing the work. So January 2025 would be on the building of it. January 2026 would be on the building of it, but more on the sustaining of it. And then some emerging data points, January 2027. Now we've got 3 data points. January 2028, we definitely have 3 data points. Does that make sense? And so there's not one answer to the question on the evaluation. Initially, it's more about the process, and then every year it should be less about the process and more about the outcome over this 4 years. Is that
I agree.
fair enough?
I agree.
That's the easiest way I can describe it. And then when you rehire him for 4 years after that, and don't change the strategic objectives, just tweak them a little bit. And I say that because that was my second 4 years in SCUC. That one was almost completely by the numbers, the second 4 years. And then I tried to quit, I told y'all, and they were like, no, 1 more 4 years, That's why I stayed 12. It was 3 4-year iterations of this. The third, 4th year iteration, years 8 through 12, it was just purely looking at the numbers. And we had recalibrated comp groups. We had a good conversation this morning, and we caught that comp group, and it felt so good to catch the comp group, rock, wall, tom, ball. It took 11 years. I'll just tell you, it took 11 years for us to catch who I felt like we should have been beating on the day I walked in there. It took 11 years. Took 11 years to get there. We did a lot of other good things in between, but we didn't hit that red line on the chart until year 11.
Can Nicole speak a little bit about?
No, I was
this?
just going to comment on the baseline surveys. We haven't had like an outcome measure on our previous TASB surveys in this type of a format since I've looked at them. I think that it would be really important to identify which of those particular questions we're going to include in this baseline, because it's such a vast survey. There's lots of different sections and points. And so are we just going to look at something overall? Are we going to look at some specific ones? And so I think that's where this team comes about in trying to identify what that looks like. If you look on the faculty and staff capacity building where it says like, I have the tools and resources to do my job, that is a specific question on a survey to measure to ensure that we can build capacity.
We put that on there as an example of
Correct.
what the question might look like. So does that make sense so the trustees could see? Like that's.
So for staff survey results, coming together and agreeing upon these specific questions to measure as our long-term goal up to 2028, I think is going to be
Your
important.
October BOY workshop, there will be BOY data on the yellow, right? We don't need, but then the blue, the peach, and the green will be a calibration. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the yellow will be ready in October to give a data report. The vision I have is October is when you all have the questions kind of settled.
Oh, definitely, because then we'll have the taper report back and we'll be able to make some.
Which I'm saying, when you go to work in October on the peach, blue, and green, it's on, let's look at the survey.
Correct.
Do you see not the survey results? That's when you're calibrating on the survey questions. So that workshop is about strategic team and tactical team agreeing to the questions that are going to be on the parent survey, the recalibration of the surveys moving forward. Is that right? I just want to make sure everybody's good. But the yellow stuff, you're going to have a bunch of data by October, right?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Yeah, because I was, I'm always tracking our constraint 3 teacher retention because these surveys played right into that. My concern over some of these is that we didn't do the one in spring like we always have. And so September is not a baseline month, right? Every teacher is happy, right? Everybody's got all their workbooks. Like that's not when you measure employee satisfaction at the beginning of a school year. You measure employee satisfaction at the end of a school year. Did I have all my stuff all year? Or mid
second semester.
Or you do too, like we do with the families and the students. You take a fall baseline and then which I know is more money and more processing type thing, but I am concerned to only use a fall baseline of employee satisfaction because you got tons of happy people running around.
But
And a lot of them have been here 2 weeks.
But just to be clear, you're saying have it ready, this is a good question, have it ready, agreed upon by fall, and then maybe it's not given until mid-second semester. If that's the agreement between the strategic team. And then you're talking about already having a focus group, just so you know. So we gave the survey that was going to all staff in April, we gave it in November to our focus group. And we said, not you as an individual, but everybody that's here is from a different campus, different department. You're answering it as if you're the whole department. So you're our eyes and ears down the street. And I was amazed at how they nailed it. We started comparing that November focus group survey to the April. They nailed it every single year. They had the best read on what was really happening. And then, by the way, sometimes in November, we got heads up on, I was like, that's not right. Something's up. So we chased that down, and sure enough, we got it. That's right. We got a hold of it in the early spring because we got this, little flare went up. And so we chased the flare and it's like, man, what happened? I mean, but we had a chance to work on it before April. That's when you check it in the middle of the year. You can over-survey. Let's be real clear.
Yes.
That's our concern.
Okay, you can over-survey. But with the focus groups, I was amazed what punch and cookies or pizza and Diet Coke, would do.
Almost said beer.
Yeah, well, Diet Coke, because we were on staff time, but bring them in and I know this month, normally we do blah, blah, blah. We're just going to have y'all take the survey. Like, that's the purpose of the meeting today. And let's talk about it for a little bit, and then we want y'all to take 30 minutes and sit here and take it. And then we fed them, and we let them go. It's a good way to just check in the middle of the year.
Well, yeah, and so I think, like Nicole was talking, you know how Panorama groups questions, right? Like, so there'll be something related to school security, right? And then there'll be like 5 or 6 questions underneath there. So if you want to dig into the details of a number, you can. So instead of things like, answering a certain question a certain way when we design, if this metric, long-term outcome is, the 5 or 6 questions that will appear related to employee engagement or related to that.
When you all calibrate, you're agreeing on those question clusters. And then I just want to be clear that we're saying the strategic team and y'all are going to bring a recommendation. But then that conversation is like, and you may call that priority 2, cluster 1, priority 2, cluster 2. Priority 2, cluster 3.
Yeah, because I can see where 2.1 can very easily be measured by the survey in terms of, do I want to stay in, am I returning? Would I recommend this district to someone else?
Correct.
There's a bunch of surveys, a cluster of questions for 2.1, a cluster of questions for 2.2, and a cluster for
That's what
2.3.
yes.
And then we're measuring our growth on the group of questions that are 2.1.
You are agreeing.
Overall.
Strategic
Where
team.
we've gone up
baseline is that group of
3% in the
questions and
2.1 questions, which may consist of 3, 5, or 7 questions,
And y'all
however
are,
many
you
we
are
come up with.
considering doing this the best way by agreeing first that the cluster of questions are correct.
Okay.
Agreeing as 2 teams, right? And that gives you all, it's a little extra work, but it gives you all a sense of, we don't want to be doing the thing that the board doesn't think, right? Like
And we're agreeing that we want to measure 2.1 with a survey, right? Like, we want that to be one of our measurement things. That's one of the things we have to agree. Because like right now, I don't think we have survey on here for 2.1. There's nothing about a survey as one of the long-term outcomes. So I guess I'm
Well, but see,
proposing
that's not gonna be
that
a
there are
survey.
things. It can be, though. If you look at a bunch of other districts, they'll ask questions about, do you recommend this district to your coworkers,
so
to your
I
friends,
think-
like that?
But
That can be surveyed also.
Exit survey?
You've got it in 2.2.
we've got it, but what we're saying on 2.1 is decrease the number of vacancies in all areas. Or we're looking at the number of employees attaining degrees. So now what we want to do is, if this is something that the board agrees that they want us to look into, now we're going to create a cohort of people who are actually degree seeking. And what are we doing in the district to get them to where they're trying to go? But we're going to have to find a way to capture that information annually so we can come back and say, hey, last year we did this with the initial group of people. This year we're up to this with the initial group.
Yeah, and I'm not saying get rid of any of the ones you have in there already. I'm saying a 4th thing you could add in there is there are survey questions that are given to staffs, that are related to recruiting and retention that
It
can
could-
also be surveyed as another measure.
It could be that, or an additional asterisk under 2.1 that says, see survey results in 2.2.
Yeah, because
You
whether or
think
not you'd
that-
recommend this district significantly impacts our retention. If everyone is telling
Can I
other
ask a
people on
question?
Facebook not to,
Can that not be a part of the HR exit questionnaire?
they don't have that anymore. They didn't do that.
We do have a
Did we get
questionnaire,
rid of that, or?
or we do have
are we-
an opportunity to have exit interviews, and we are revamping that process right now. So we actually do have a questionnaire that we will be sending out, and different ways to actually exit so that we can capture whether or not an exit interview is either being requested or that we randomly select.
Is there a
So
way?
it's an option? They don't have to do the exit interview?
No, they have to give a reason.
Survey?
They have to give a reason of their exit, but an in-depth exit interview is in the works of being reinstated as a process.
Okay, but it can
To
be in the
agree.
form of a survey, right?
Yes, ma'am.
As it has been in the past with these same questions. Would you recommend the district, blah, 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 blah? I mean,
It
I've
could
seen
definitely
it.
be in the form of a survey.
Right. Okay, I'm just asking.
This is a conversation we should be having in October.
Okay, thank you. The president just whispered to me, this sounds like October's conversation that
Yep.
we're spontaneously having right now, and that is correct. But it's good, it gives us a
Gives us
feel.
something to think about.
That's right, these are all the things to think about for
So one
the-
thing to do in October would be come prepared with the questions that are on our survey for us to look at and see if and where they plug in.
That's
in October.
correct. You're right, we jumped into the October workshop. You are correct.
Try to pull us back
No,
so that
you-
we don't go over time.
And I love this stuff, and so, because I could do this all day, so thank you. But yeah, the stuff that we're talking about, you're spot on, like, that's the stuff. And again, the yellow stuff's going to have some data. So then you're going to have to pause, and now we're going to talk about how we're going to measure these other things that are less readily quantifiable. Does that make sense? Because
So what we're doing today is we're kind of looking at what are
Yes, ma'am.
all the strategic objectives, the long-term outcomes, and those particular things are how we're going to do those. That's the October.
Right, but it would
So
be.
today, we're kind of in column 1 and 2
Correct, but the rationale for showing column
Right.
3 is
to help explain one.
That's exactly
one and
right. The team said if we don't show where
Right.
we're headed with it, there's no
No,
way.
no.
I would, as a board member, I heard them say it, feel comfortable with it,
Right.
adopting.
They're very generic. Well, not generic, but they're not,
They're broad.
yeah, that.
And what you'll see after this, Ms. Canoyer, are those 2 columns that we took out before, which are going to be how we're going to go about getting that done.
Right.
Yes,
And the board will never adopt those, but will receive reports on them
Right.
at the checkpoints.
correct.
There's a question from the.
Yeah, this is just a quick suggestion, because we probably won't get into it in this meeting, but just kind of a thought. I've noticed a lot of people, teacher surveys, use the word personal as their reason, which kind of camouflages a lot of real reasons. And I wonder if the survey on, would you recommend this district, or what are your reasons for leaving? If it came to the board, I'm just saying, here's a suggestion, where people know, okay, these questions are going straight to the board, and maybe I can be more forthcoming on my reason. It's just a thought that just occurred to me. I haven't been thinking about it, but it's just putting it out
Well,
there.
if it becomes a measurement that's agreed upon on this, the processes will tighten up around it over time. Like, if you're formalizing exit interview data as one of the measures, if that's what the full board in October agrees to with the tactical team, then your processes will tighten up. In other words, if the question's not giving us anything to follow up on, then we'll modify it because it's not helping us with learning. This is check information. If we,
Well, yeah, I think with the audit committee, we talked about this, I think, Mr. Macias, at the audit committee too, is maybe in October, we can talk about whether we should consider shopping out our exit interviews to a third party.
Yeah.
Because it is very hard to get honest feedback, because education is a very small world. So
Yeah.
if you fill out your exit survey and it gets back to HR,
think
that doesn't
that's
mean, so I think in October, maybe that's something we can talk
It's a fair question to
about.
have, and I will tell you, for 12 years, we've talked about this in this way every single year. Like, I felt like we kind of, not perfected, but we got some other data points, and then we just were constantly, like, do we do a third party, or do we do this internally? Like, we were constantly having that. When it came to the peach area, let me just say it that way, right? Because it is hard. Texas has, 30 billion people, and it seems like they all know each other, all the teachers and staff and administrators. That's exactly right. And it's a perennial challenge if you're trying to get good data.
I think that it would be we could definitely consider all of those different options when it comes to exit interviews and exit surveys. But I do also think that there needs to be an opportunity for the district and the HR department to regain the trust. And if we are automatically saying your exit interview data is going to go straight to the board, it kind of it trumps the relationship building or the information seeking as that department that kind of oversees recruitment and retention. And so I think that there just needs to also be an opportunity for us to be able to gather that data, and what we do with that data moving forward can help build that trust and can help build that positive perception that we take it seriously, we keep it as confidential as possible, but we still are looking into those reasons and trying to make certain changes. So anything to help us improve should definitely be considered, but I do think that a consideration of allowing the department to build that trust is also important.
Yep, very good. If I may, Madam President, just to keep us on today's track and outcomes, deliverables for today, I want to touch on one like broad stroke, and then the big question here is, as the trustees glance at this, are they comfortable enough? There's two approaches that you could take. One would be, when you approve this, take the long-term outcomes completely out of that and just adopt the priorities and the strategic objectives. I mean, like soon. Then coming back in the fall workshop, we're bringing these back in. Or you could adopt it just as we're looking at it here with the blanks in it. You see, like as we're building the blanks. Now, the blanks are something I need to touch on. The formula here that you should be very familiar with Lone Star governance is X to Y by Z. Okay, so X, we had great conversations on the X in the last 90 days. Like, we got to get comfortable with, even today, someone saying it's 62, someone saying it's 63, someone saying it's 64. All of those were correct responses depending on how you got the data. But we're never going to say it might be 62, it might be 63, it might be 64 again. We're going to reach agreement and say it's 63, like that. Yeah, X is this. Then that gets us to Y. So Y, there's going to be a little bit of a difference between the way the strategic team views Y and the way the admin team views Y. And I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. Now, Z, we're agreeing to 2028. So, see, we're agreeing like this is a 4-year plan. So why we're going to calibrate and we're going to have the X's figured out, but then we've got to reach agreement on the Y's. So your trustees, you're going to go to workshops at different things, and it's going to say everything should be 100%, maybe, sometimes. So the goal is 100%, but we're taking a 4-year bite out of that journey. They don't want to demoralize staff by never
Reaching the goal.
never hitting an attainable 4-year goal. So I'm not saying we have to solve that now. I'm just saying be ready for that. SMART goal, strategic, measurable, attainable, whatever the R and the T.
Results-driven, time-bound.
There you go, results-driven, time-bound. But we really have to think about the attainable. So a part of why these workshops initially are going to be important is giving time to agree on what that 4-year number is. Does that make sense? Like, we've got to have time to have dialogue about what's the right amount for this next 4 years. And I mean, the beauty of it is, again, I'll go back to my personal, we would talk about all that, calibrate, work hard, hit it, okay, stay, 4 more years, and we're going to stretch it some more, okay? So then we got the next slice, and again, they talked me into that 3rd, 4th year slice because we hadn't hit, some of where we wanted them to be, and so, let me back up. We felt like there was some room on a lot of them to get, like, kind of getting up into some rare air, like, let's go chase the really high performing. So, I just wanted to, X to Y by Z is the formula here. There needs to be some robust discussion about the why and that. No, it's just agreeing that they're going to get solid on the X's to the ones that they can. Some of it you have the X. Some of the X's are coming from surveys that we've got to, some of the X's we've got to create the tool together before we can have the X. Right? Your baseline X is going to be your initial response to these clusters of questions.
I'm interested in having a discussion on these particular goals at some point, right? That's coming.
October, yes.
Okay. October?
Well,
For some of them.
we're just saying your first workshop is in October, and then you're going to do another workshop in February.
Okay.
So the October workshop will be designed to help talk about what is the why going to be. They're going to come with X. So what do we determine the why is going to be? That's part of that conversation in October.
Because then we're going to use this to assess the superintendent, and he's only going to have a few months.
Well, I'm saying.
This isn't going to be the total measure. We are not necessarily measuring him on did he get to Y in January? We can't do that. But what we can measure him on, and I made myself a note to talk with Dr. Gibson and Dr. Fields about working on a draft of how we are going to evaluate him in January so that we all have that to go by with total board input, you know. What Dr. Gibson said is we can't, since we won't have results to evaluate him on, what we can evaluate him on is process. So how'd the process go to establish all this? Do we need more information on this? Do we need it to look like this? So that'll be part of what we look
In
at.
January of 2025, and
Right.
in January of 2026, you'll have.
Then
more
we'll have some data that we can
January
include.
But shouldn't we have it broken down into maybe annual, or, because if it's stretched out 4 or 5 years?
Well, that's easy for them to do, like what's your annual?
So those are the interim progress measures that we look at. So for year one, we're expecting this much growth. For year two, we're expecting this much
Right.
growth.
It's-
But we have to establish the overall
Right.
one first.
Right.
We started working on that a lot with the growth and achievement, academic achievement today, because we've got that. So what we're looking at is trends, to Ms. Ryan's point, where we came from. But that's not what we're going to do going forward. We also want to look at, okay, where is this cohort at? Where is the region at? Where is the state at? Where are we? And how do we get just to that? And now, aspirationally, we want to be 100 in all the areas, but we at least want to be that now. So in 4 years, how do we get to where the state is? What's that number? And then incrementally, what do we have to look at to get that going each year? Now, keep in mind, the goal is to get to a place by 2028, not that we made that incremental gain each year. But how that helps is we can go back to the campus administrators that are coming in week after next and say, okay, hey, we've got this. This is how we're going to march off. So,
And you've got 1.1 lined out.
yeah, we've got it lined out. So now we go back to the principals and the administrative team and the academic coaches and trainers and say, hey, this is what we're looking at, and this is how we plan to get there. Now, we've already examined this to, I mean, I'm not going to call her the brainiac, but Denise's point, she's looked at, okay, where's the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to math? Well, we know 7th grade math is an issue. What are we doing there to course correct, to get to where we need to be able to pull that in? In science and social studies, we know 8th grade science and social studies is the biggest bang for our buck. When it comes to English, we know across the district, if we can improve our writing and our understanding, when they're doing the math problems, we're going to see some incremental
And if
gain.
I made those things that he is describing right now, just to be real clear, that's what you're evaluating on in January of 2025. Progress towards these, you just said
Right.
course correction. That's January 2025. January 2026, he's got some data to show it's trending in the right direction.
This is how we got there.
Right.
Until October, we're just going to go with these numbers for now, with these goals.
Well, but 1.1 does. They need
Yeah.
1.1.
Yeah.
They need that to get started the year. And by the way, in the past, 1.1 is all that's required by law. There it is. There's your HB3 goals. That's everything else that's on here exceeds. You have now a community-based accountability system. Congratulations.
'Cause I don't even
Everybody
know-
says we want that.
I don't even like approaches, honestly.
And they're aggregated, all grades.
Well, but when you see data, though, they'll
Yep,
disaggregate.
and
They're just,
that'll be in the next other columns, not for us.
No, the board goal by HB3 has to be 3rd grade math.
right, they've got it sliced and diced 1,000 ways. I've looked at it. But they're rolling it up to one aggregate just for this outwardly facing. But you're going
For
to
this
see it.
document.
Because for one thing, we can't do that comparison, Ms. Ryan, the comparison line like I was talking about, unless we disaggregate it, if that makes sense. Like, we've got to show where the comparison group's 3rd grade is. We've got to show where so you'll see that disaggregated, but it all rolls up.
I think it is hard. October is going to be a year we've been working on this, and literally we've got like students, staff, and we're gonna grow. Like, maybe it's just me that like, I feel like we vote on 100 things a month, you know, as board members type thing. And I feel like I need an actual real guiding document to guide all of those decisions. So it's like, God, if we wait till October and then we hash over more things.
I can make up a bunch of stuff and put it on here and send it back to you, and y'all can approve it.
No.
And it's gonna crash and burn. I mean, I'm just.
Oh, yeah, no,
because you
I'm
haven't
just saying.
Created it collectively, right?
Yes.
We're committing to a long-term process here. That's the best way I can say it.
Well, yeah, no, I just don't feel like we're not gonna get this column done today. Like, there's not enough hours left to get, you know, agreement on.
You know, and I would say it's February's work, and it's probably next August work.
Yeah, and it's going to be refining it. What we have to have by law is the yellow, and we have that here. It's not delineated out the way you would like it. You would like more information on
No.
what third grade, fourth grade, those targets are.
No.
Is that what I'm hearing?
House Bill 3 says it has to be a third grade math, a
Right.
third grade,
That-
oh,
You
okay.
want to speak?
No,
It can't
It
be
does.
a
House
3
Bill
through 8
does
and
require that
EOC goal.
breakdown.
it's rolled into this. We
you guys
might
do
want,
It's-
that's a good point. We may want.
Just those
Put it-
few categories that are required to have that specific goal should probably be in that column, because I believe a board has to adopt that,
Which you can, and I,
the
And
third
that-
grade
that
reading,
is a
third grade
separate
math.
action. So House Bill 3 did come out a couple years ago where you do develop a target for third grade reading, third grade math,
And
and
CCMR.
seventh grade.
No, not seventh grade.
Sorry,
CCMR.
CCMR. We added that seventh grade when we looked
Yeah.
at board goals
Yeah.
previously, but that is something that they still look at. What you have here is just an aggregate of all of the goals, so that when we are presenting data, we can give you the overview, but certainly when you receive the data, you also get that breakdown. Is there more
I've
that you
seen
wanna-
some districts here on your 1.1 and 1.3, just put a hyperlink, click here to see House Bill 3 goals. Do you see what I'm saying? So, like, let's say this is posted on the website, there's just a link right there, and then I jump over and I see what the board adopted for those. Because
But we don't want the scorecard to be all about House Bill 3.
That's correct.
We want.
That's why it's just
This
a
is
hyperlink
a
over.
comprehensive look at
That's right.
everything.
Correct. No, I just want to make sure we, on record, adopt
Oh,
goals
no,
related to
no.
those
You-
three
you'll
categories
You'll have
and
goals
to
for
just to be in compliance.
every grade.
Yeah,
So,
but we
you
don't
know.
adopt all your interim progress measures.
Correct. She's just saying.
I'm saying the board specifically has to adopt a third grade reading goal
Understood.
versus.
It's required.
Your fourth grade one will be over in your column. You deal with
We
fourth
can
grade.
make sure that that's in.
So,
I just know districts that once that's adopted, they're just hyperlinking it here in 1.1 and 1.3 to just show they were board adopted. They're part of these two. Jump over here if you want to see them.
And just for clarification, we do have currently adopted goals already for that. Yeah, so
Correct.
you just
Okay,
make sure.
thank you. This is a good place to put them, just to hyper. So the question for today is, you said this a while ago, and I'm going to read, is column 2 right? That's really the question.
Is that what we want to be measuring in our scorecard?
That's right,
So we need consensus on
column 2,
column 2, which is the strategic objectives themselves.
right? We need.
Correct.
Is column 2 the right stuff?
Column 2, exactly. And, I apologize. Column 2, but also with an understanding of the long-term outcomes.
Right.
Because again, in 2 weeks, we're going to start having these conversations. I just want to make sure we're going in the right direction and the board doesn't feel like, okay, that's not what we want. Well, we're developing,
Yeah, they're about to step on the gas with a lot of work.
Right.
Around these. But we have to make sure that 2 is about right, and we're trying to keep 2 stable for 4 years.
Right.
well, and to
That's
Ms.
another really important point.
And to Ms. Ryan's point, she feels like we've kind of been in the blocks on this, to use a track analogy, for a long time, and nobody's firing a gun and we're going. We're trying to run, and this allows us to run. We're just saying, let us run in this direction. That's what we need. And an overall agreement from the board that we're moving in the right direction. And then we're going to clean this, we're going to kind of perfect it as we move forward, but we just need to get out of the blocks. This helps us to get out of the blocks.
Dr. Fields, could I add one
Yes, ma'am.
piece? So going back to like what I think you were asking about is like, I don't know how I feel about these goals. So there's lots of conversation about where have we been historically. You have to remember that we also have accountability refresh, a new test. So going back and looking at 2017, 2018, 2019 is a little bit irrelevant
This is
Because
STAR 2.0. This is different from all that
all
stuff
of
that
that
we
looks
set the
brand new,
goals on
right?
before.
So if we take the baseline of where we are right now and we think about the components of a SMART goal, the most important piece being, is it attainable? Then we have to figure out, okay, what does that look like for us moving forward? So if you look at this, the third grade, and like we said, it is an aggregate of all of those, but when we come to these workshops, we're going to report on each grade level individually. This is how third grade is doing in Judson ISD. Not this is how 3rd through 8 and EOC is doing. Here's how third grade is looking in Judson ISD. But the point is we have to have these end goals. We have to have these 2028 goals in place so that we can figure out, okay, so what gains do we need to make in 2025? What gains do we need to make in 2026? Because this conversation then for us in a week and a half sounds like, okay, campus principals, this is what you are tasked for. At your campus specifically, we expect to see these gains at your campus across these grade levels.
This coming year,
Yes.
Right.
towards this.
And that makes
Because-
sense.
Yeah.
You are hearing me correctly. I've been waiting since I got on the board when we'd come to this discussion about these goals. And I'm not personally feeling them. I feel like they're a little minimal to me. I feel like we could be a little more aggressive with them. And it's not an exact science, and what we decide is attainable is not necessarily, something that you can prove right or wrong just by saying, I feel we can do better by stretching a little more. That's what I feel. And I want to have that conversation at some point. I don't even want to see us mess with approaches, quite frankly.
I can-
just focus on meets and masters, and that's the discussion I want to have, and look at something a little more aggressive in the numbers. So I'm just going to put that out in the universe as something that I'm feeling.
And I appreciate you sharing that. But these are the right direction towards what you want, right? Yeah, they're moving. Yeah, they are the correct direction. And there's nothing inside the 4-year window that says if we hit something before the 4 years is over, that we can't recalibrate that outcome measure to
You feel
move it
free
up.
to say what you.
I think what they're trying to make it attainable so that we hit it, and then let's say we hit it early, and that happened in SCUC a number of times, so we would bring back to the board, we're recalibrating the outcome measure because we actually hit that before the 4 years was over.
May I add another layer? So we talked about a week after next when we meet with principals, talking about this is our goal, this is where we're going to be in 2028, this is what it looks like for 2025, this is what it looks like for 2026. The turnaround for that is campus principals then go back to teachers August 4th or August 5th and say, you, Ms. Stanford, teaching third grade, this is your goal for 2025. So that's why we have to decide upon a hard number, because, we have 4,000 employees that are waiting for what are the marching orders, what is the goal. Then when we talk about attainable, as far as kids and teachers are concerned, we just had this conversation, that carrot has to be right here. Because if the carrot is right here, I am motivated to reach that goal. But as a 9-year-old, if the carrot is way over there, you lost me day
Aspirationally,
one. You
then
lost me at day
I
one.
can't get there.
If it's right here in front and
Right.
I can see I can reach this with hard work, with dedication, with doing a little bit more, I can reach this, then we met our goal. And then like Dr. Gibson said, if we exceed that goal, we come back and we say, okay, we undershot. Now we just adjust it a little bit more. Some of these 2028 goals are right at the region and the state. So we're not underselling ourselves. We're just trying to break it in incremental pieces so that students and teachers who are doing the work can see it's right here. All I have to do is reach. It's right here. Hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And it's easy for a teacher to get that day one and say, this is where we need to be at the end of the year, have it something that's attainable, and plot a plan and stick to it as we move through it towards the end of the year. But if we come in saying, hey, every classroom needs to go up 30 percentage points and meets,
They're going to think that you don't mean it.
and then
They're just going
Are
to.
we involving the students in their goals? I've seen a presentation
Definitely.
that where the students are trying to set goals and track their own
I have been talking about that for the last
Achievement.
month, Ms. Stanford. I think that what we need to do is identify those TEKs that are really low and have all the students' names on there and say that just to check, not a grade. They've got it, they don't. And then as your peer, I notice everybody's got this but you. Let me show you how to do this problem. You know what I mean? There's certain things that we can do to be attentive at every grade level to bring these grades up. We just got to make it a priority, make it realistic, let everybody know where we're going and how we're going to get there, and then we can start getting out of the blocks. But right now, we're doing a lot of time talking about what we have to do to be able to run the race, but we got to start running. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Fields?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, one of the things, last couple of years, when I kind of cruise around at the beginning of the school year, and I hear teachers talking to the students, one of the things they do at the beginning of their classes, they ask the students, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? This is what you need to successfully complete second grade. I'm focusing on them because that's where my grandbabies were. And they let them, say, hey, I want an A at the end of the year, or I think I can do a B. And then they kind of go through, this is the pathway to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So they let them do that. And I really think that's a good thing, but that's at the classroom level with the students and the teachers that are going to be doing that all year.
And those are a lot of that is what we're talking about.
It's interesting, we moved out there on that acreage, and I want like a front lawn turf from the mailbox to behind the riding arena. And that's probably 12 acres. Okay, so I got a lot of equipment.
Long-term goal. don't
Okay,
you?
that's right. And that's my vision. And so I have these junior high kids that come out and help. And if I say from the mailbox to behind the arena turf, it just melts them because it's too much for them to comprehend. So I don't say that. I just say cut the yard, go over there and cut behind the arena, okay, I'm gone, and then get you some water, jump in the pool. Now go cut that, so I don't, but so anyway, it's the same concept. I know if I say we're going to keep 12 acres like a lawn, it just melts them down. I mean, they just can't see. Pardon?
No, but the teachers.
Right, I'm just saying we're trying to give this really attainable, and then if we get that, okay, we're gonna move it, so it's not like this is set in stone. It's let's hit it, Kristen said it, let's hit it, and then we can always, hey,
Ms. Stanford, we will.
we get that early.
We will.
Let's
I
do it.
really want this to be a rally cry for what we said we were going to get to. And if you go through these, you'll notice that it's 3% at masters, 5% at meets, and 10% at approaches. Across the board, every category. That's 3, 5, and 10%. And that's enough for everybody to understand, and everybody in every classroom. The
And you
goal
feel it's
is
attainable?
3, 5, we can get there. I think we can get there by 2028 in each one of those categories.
When you share the goal and you make them a part of it,
Right.
Yep.
it's like, let's stretch.
And now the community knows it. How you doing on your 3, 5, 10? Which one are you in? Are you in 3, 5, or 10? So we can go up in each one of those. It's just,
We have contests.
yes, ma'am.
Classes.
Correct.
Absolutely.
That's been done.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let me just add a couple of things, just so I'm clear as well. We will be annually reviewing these targets, right? So it's not like we're locked in for the duration. We will evaluate based on feedback and
Correct.
all of that stuff.
Mr. Macias, that's part of the EOY report
Yes.
and how it's
And
different than the BOY, MOY.
Yeah, the interview, so I just want to make sure that that is one thing. And secondly, if administration stipulates that these are benchmarks that are being targeted that are consistent in our county, in Bexar County and state, I always look at if we can be the best in Bexar County first, if we can be the best in the state second, and so on, as we continue to climb and make them realistic. I'm comfortable with that. That's sort of the goal. But the key is to identify as a team what else is needed in our changing district based on our challenges. How can we ensure student outcomes are optimal at every time. And so we'll be working that throughout the year, I suspect.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
That's well said.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know, I guess I'm back to a comment I made a couple of sessions ago, which is I'm missing verbs. All right, I'm ignoring column 3 because I can't even, I'm having a hard time getting past 2, which is what we're talking about adopting. And I just,
The verbs are in the strategic actions that are not.
I mean, I'm looking for when I'm sitting at the NEP talking to the Mayor Kirby, I gotta be able to talk about something, right? And the words coming out of my mouth are not equity of funds, right? 4.2, equity of funds. So when I look at other scorecards though, they're not worded like this. Other districts are not, like, these are a couple of catchphrase words, but like, I don't feel like this inspires anybody down the chain to what they're supposed to be doing to support this. Like, here's one example of their, like, let's look at whatever, the green stuff. You know, one district has, we will responsibly manage the use of financial and operational resources in order to sustain equitable funding to support academic excellence and to provide a safe, efficient operations of the district. Like, that is full of a lot of adverbs that tells me what we, and adjectives of what we do.
Yeah, that's the column that's not in here that can be visible, but I don't think needs to be adopted. Because if that organization adopted those, and then they need to kill one of those and do something else, they're going to have to bring that back to the board to unadopt that action and re-adopt a new action. You still, the board needs to adopt the objectives. The
I'm
visibility.
just trying to figure out how equity of funds is an objective.
Well, it is.
I don't even know what it
It's a
means,
target.
but.
It's a category of work. So I'm going to be real clear. I think the board in SCUC, not I think, I know, they wanted to carry our scorecard that had the actions in it for the very same reason she's bringing up. Like Scott Harrod wanted to have.
Yeah, like, this is the heart of who Judson is.
He wanted that in his jacket pocket, so if someone said, what are you working on? He could say, well, these are the key strategic actions. So he wanted to get into the action. So I'm saying that you should probably have access to that once it's finalized, but that's not what we're asking for right now. Right now, we're
Listen
just.
for a list of categories. Like, all these things just seem
No,
very
you're-
opposite, very obvious. It's like, what are you doing, Judson? We're doing academic growth. Wow, you're so different than 1,000
Well,
other
no.
districts. Oh, I mean, everybody's working on academic growth, so I guess I don't.
This is step 1. You're asking for step
Okay.
8. And so what I'm saying is they have actions. Y'all got along. In fact, they're not sharing them right now because there's still so many of them in there. They're trying to get them aligned to the key strategic actions. Is that right? I mean,
Correct. That's why we agreed that we were going to take them out in the last.
It's just.
Oh, yeah, no, and I know they've got like 450 sheets that accompany this that have
Well,
all
they're
their
actually-
tactical
They're
stuff.
actually trying
Not quite
to
that many.
crystallize all of that to these key strategic actions.
Correct.
Like, and then that's what I think Ms. Ryan, that's what you're asking for, and I think the board should have that. You don't adopt it, but you should have
We
it.
just aren't going to have it today.
Correct.
So what our goal is today is, do we
Adopt
agree that
categories?
these are the areas that we should be focused on?
That's the purpose of today.
So that's today. And then we will get, when they've crystallized those, they will inform us and add to the scorecard for us to carry around. This is how we're going to work on those areas.
The key strategic
But that's not ready yet. So today, what we're doing is we're coming to consensus and says, I agree that we have to focus on this. I agree we have to focus on this, this,
Down column 2.
all the way down column 2. Are there any of these that you think we shouldn't be focusing on as a district? Those areas. And then what comes is, okay, so now let's make these more defined. In parent and family satisfaction and engagement, what is that really saying? What are the strategic things we're going to do for that? But that's not what we're going to adopt
Right.
as a board.
I guess it just feels too
It's
generic. I mean,
information.
I don't know any
I
school
understand.
district that isn't doing
Right.
all these exact things.
We're not doing everything today. This is a
Yeah.
process.
Step 1.
And they don't really feel like priorities because they feel like every single thing we do in this entire district is in one of these categories, right? Like, I don't feel like this narrows us and prioritizes us so that we're not
Well,
shotgunning anything, so.
Have you had objectives adopted before on staff and stakeholders?
Not on business and community partnerships, we
business.
haven't. We haven't had,
Right.
you know. So there
Not
are some
business.
things that we're doing that are new.
You may have been doing those things, but
Yes.
the board.
Oh, no,
did not
But it
adopt-
wasn't
Correct.
adopted.
We were doing them and shotgunning and not
Right.
really knowing what the priority
this
was,
is the
right? We were
four-
doing everything, right?
This is the first step towards taking the shotguns going and saying, no, we got these, how many are there?
Well, and putting a target to it. Before, it was something that we looked at, but there wasn't really a target that
wasn't a
says,
way,
hey,
right.
this is
Oh, no, I
how we're
agree.
gonna
Once
measure
this spreadsheet
success
goes farther
or
to the
not
right,
success.
I'm going to become happier. I just,
That- and
the
that's kinda-
genericness of 1 and
it's
2 a year into this process.
But the
I'm
reason
like,
we have to have it already in yellow is because that has to get out to our staff
Right.
immediately. The other part is in the works. You can see all the blanks there. This is going to need to be work that we do ongoing.
The reason that, if I might, that was well said, President Canoer, the reason, or just to be real clear, the purpose of the workshops, BOY, MOY, EOY, especially BOY, MOY, is to talk about the actions, Ms. Ryan, that you're bringing up. That's the purpose of the workshops. See, you've adopted an objective. We're going to do a BOY workshop on the actions, the tactical actions. See, the tactical team's going to share, these are the actions. And I would think potentially by that first workshop, we can show a really pared down, it gets so jumbled with all y'all's notes in there, and that's fine. I know y'all are trying to think together and be transparent. But like, what's the key strategic action? 1, 2, 3.
We've already identified the people who are going to put those actions together.
See, they're actually assigning.
You can see that on
Actually
the document.
assigning.
I would just say that, Ms. Ryan, when we come back, if you could say things like, how does facility and capacity assessments and planning for capacity needs, or meeting the needs based on per pupil affect equity of funds? Now we can speak to the logic of why it's on there. But when you say things like, what does equity of funds have to do with it, or I don't understand, those are the type, when he was talking about the question phrasing, because when we sat and talked about this, we felt like the use of the facility, and you know as well, you probably know better than everyone else around the table, you know where we're getting ready to go. So how is that going to speak to the equity when we start putting it out there to the community saying, hey, are we really utilizing all of our facilities at the same capacity? Because we can show here where it's extremely underutilized.
Do you, I just had a thought. I apologize, this is like off the top of my head. If the board adopts the objectives and then we get clarity around the key strategic actions, there's nothing that says you can't put them back together for the outwardly facing document. You can put those key, that's what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like, let me give you another example. Like, under their green, they've got ensure the district's financial stability through an appropriate fund balance. That's their objective. And then for their column 2, then in their column 3, they set annual targets, right? Of what the district's fund balance is going to be over the course
Got
of
the groundwork.
4 years. And then y'all figure out how to do that. we just tell you, hey, we got to have a robust fund balance, and this is the percentages, and then you fill out the other 2
I think you have on
columns.
here what that has on there. It's in 4.3, decrease the
Yeah.
deficit by 1% annually to move towards a balanced
They've got
budget.
some.
Did we all agree on that 1%?
Well,
We didn't agree on anything in column 3 yet.
Here's the issue. Again, in the phrasing of your questions, if you could say, how does decreasing by 1% help us to decrease, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the concern I have here is we're working on decreasing the deficit and we're working on balancing the budget, but truly, we're not driving the car on that. We're kind of passengers. We saw an example of that in our last board meeting when we passed the budget. You see what I'm saying? So I can set this goal to say that we're going to decrease the budget deficit by $5 million or $10 million every year. But I can't, I mean, you could come in and say, no, we think that the priority now is to give another raise, and now it's going to go up 10 million. So I don't want to put an unrealistic goal in there that I don't really have control over. So I can tell
And that's
you.
what we're going to work on in October also, is setting
Boom,
those,
yes, ma'am.
all that
That's
column
it.
3, right?
Because
Okay.
if we agree on where we're going on that, now maybe I can hold you guys accountable and say, hey, we're
Well,
getting
it's
ready to do that
everybody
last minute
hold
thing
everybody
again.
accountable.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, ma'am.
Well, I would just say that I do like this step. I do feel it is definitely the necessary process as we're going forward to give Dr. Fields and the administration some targets as well as our staff. So I think this, what Ms. Ryan was trying to say is it's really general, but that's okay. At least it's general on paper, and we're still moving forward. As before, it wasn't even as generalized.
Exactly.
So this
No
is
target.
important stuff, and I appreciate that we'll have follow-up meetings. But as board members, we always know we can talk to administration and our superintendent about anything that is concerning in terms of strategic development. But I'm very satisfied with this document. I think it's definitely a good start, and it is a living document, which means it will grow, and my hope is, obviously, when Dr. Fields plans to retire 10 years from now, that this document continue to stay
You get 10 years?
with,
Is that it?
with our administration and our board, because that's sort of the weakness. Every administration comes in and,
And we're starting over from scratch.
yeah, we don't want to do that if we're really going to get to those next levels.
Yes.
Agreed.
So these are just topics that we're, areas.
Yeah, categories, that's a good word.
Priorities.
And so then I'm still waiting, everybody agrees that these are categories that should be priorities for us to focus on this document.
They're, to the extent that they're
Right.
going to message them immediately and then prepare them to be adopted
Correct.
in 30 days.
Customer service, where would you say that is?
And should be in 3.
That would be satisfaction and,
Yeah, I would think they're general enough to where we can find,
Yes.
yeah,
And-
I would hope.
But we're already moving in that direction, Ms. Stanford.
Yeah.
and then when you have the key strategic indicators resolved, those will be shared with us.
Yes,
Even
ma'am.
if it's before October.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Then also in October, it starts the process of the admin team sharing some of the actions, which is the how, right?
Right.
I
But
know
it-
you were wanting to say, yeah.
But in order to do that, it helps if we have a greater consensus on the long-term actions so
Yeah.
that we can look at the yearly strategic actions,
Yep.
which could change as we near our target.
And I think we had talked about integrating security. I see the word safety in there and some of your stuff too. If we can make sure the words, we didn't want a separate security goal, even though we had seen that with some of the other ones. If we can make sure that as you all fill out the rest of the chart, security is somewhere in each of those little categories.
Curiously, Dr. Gosh, you're on a board yourself. Do y'all have something similar to this?
Give her a minute to think.
If the answer is no, I have a business card.
The answer is, yes, we have a governing document that we use to evaluate the superintendent. It is not as granular as this particular scorecard. It has more to do with very general categories of where we would like the district rating to be, what we would like our turnover rates to be. It is not nearly as in-depth as this, but we do have a guiding document that we use. It's a one-page document, and it has, here are the 5 goals, and here are the things that we would like the superintendent to focus on. And under each one of those, there's probably 1 to 2 bullet points that we then evaluate the superintendent up on.
So what's your
But it is nowhere
opinion?
near this specific as to it has to be X to Y by date. It is a 4-year plan, and it is a, like a guiding principle, and we simply measure that from year to year on, are we seeing progress towards what our end goal is of our students, our district rating overall being an A, or our district rating overall being a B, or our retention rate, being 4 points below the state, that kind of thing.
So how would your board look at something like this? How do you look at something? Does this look too granular to you?
I think that this provides If you're asking me as a board member, I would say that I think this gives some very specific targets in some areas that I think the size of Judson and some of our demographics require that we focus more attention on some of these. I don't disagree with the X to Y because it does hold us accountable and it holds you guys accountable. I think based on our history of looking at our budget, looking at our spending, and looking at our student outcomes, I think that the long-term outcomes and specifying these are accurate for Judson ISD. I don't think that you can compare district to district in terms of how that works in that aspect. But solidifying these and identifying good baselines and then allowing us to set those targets so that we know we can work towards that with the knowledge that we will up those antes as we attain those, I think is the right direction to go in.
So if I'm not going to pass these out because I don't want to change the conversation, and I think they need some time maybe to eat before you do something else. Is that right? Yeah. But I'm just going to hold this up as a visual, and then they're here for your distribution. Well, so if you all remember the good governance inventory, I'm pivoting just a little bit, but not completely. So you all answered questions like, we have collectively developed and formally adopted belief, mission, and vision. Our actions are consistent with belief, mission, and vision. Our belief, mission, and vision regularly reviewed on through six different good governance. You remember earlier the 6 different areas. Okay, so there are 2 scorecards at play now, and that can be confusing. This is the scorecard that the board oversees, because this is the work of the tacticians, but that y'all are overseeing this work. This is a scorecard for the board to strive to be the best board they can be. So just like you want to set the Y high on all of these, all this orange needs to become green. I'm just going to say it. Because we color code orange if the majority of the responses are no or I don't know. If y'all remember, it was yes, no, or I don't know. And we need this to all get green. You had one yellow in there, I think.
Yellow's better,
Yellow's better, but
but it's not all.
But the best way to model continuous improvement expectations for your tactical team is to say, we've got targets for us to be the best board that we can be. And in parallel to them working on all of the, and by the way, these intersect, because when we do these workshops and we calibrate, we're getting to a better level of understanding with the tactical team that starts moving these to yellow. I don't want to hijack the rest of this meeting. These are here for them to take with them, but there are good actions to take. I would argue, we took this back in April. I would argue that some
Some are going to move
are going to move just because of what we're doing
with this.
this work. You see, like some of this is going to get to yellow just because of what we're doing. And then others of it are going to take some work. I'm going to keep this and wait on your command on whatever you all want to do with this next. But does that, this is what you're monitoring. This is what the board does. The board does, they work to be the best board they can be. And then they monitor the district. Fair enough? And I'm gonna let, it's your back. Yeah, if
It's
you
back to me now.
It's back to you, and you can tell me to skedaddle or what. Okay, all right.
I think we have finished with
Okay,
this.
I'm
And
gonna
I
shake
think
everybody's hand.
that this meeting actually is finished. So this meeting, special meeting, is adjourned at 2:33 PM.